which can be found at lunenburgma.gov, has the phone numbers you can use, as well as the link to the Zoom, if you want to join either of those. And with that, let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Oh, no hand.
Are there any announcements from the board? I don't think I have any announcements. All right, is there any public comment from the public?
Rhonda Licia, 181 Reservoir Road. I have more of a question than a comment. And wasn't sure if I just want this to be addressed hopefully at some point during tonight's meeting. It's my recollection that the fact that we contribute to OPEB has a direct impact on our bond rating. And I was just thinking about how there's a possibility we won't be contributing to that this year. And so I wanted to know what impact that would have on our bond rating, and especially due to the fact that we could be looking at like 5.8 up to like, I don't know, the possibility of what, 32 million in debt exclusions. So I was just concerned about our impact to borrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you ask them to get 2 microphones for there and at least 1 for over there? Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda.
Sitting there now.
Well, you guys can brief from there if you want.
We usually stand on the podium. Where do you want to stand on that podium?
Okay. Well, can you, 1 for the table? Thank you. All right, is there any other public comment? Is there any public comment from the board? Nope. All right, any town manager and/or finance director reports for us? No? No? Nothing, okay. All right, look at that, we're already on number 6. All right, so next up is either municipal design or parks. Did you guys flip a coin to see who goes first? Okay.
Do you need more support? I can say next.
Well, I'll take all the moral support I can get. Good evening. My name is Michael Ray Jeffries. I live at 1170 Mass Ave in Lunenburg, and I'm here representing the Municipal Building Design Committee. Good to see you guys again.
If you can just wait for 1 second. The presentation, if you want to follow along, is you got to go to lunenburgma.gov, boards and commission, Lunenburg Municipal Design, and then there's, on the left-hand side, click the top, and then there's 1 more for a presentation.
So I was hoping that someone could share it in the room so I could see it off to my right here so I can...
I will share.
All right. If the booth is able to project it to the screen off to the right, that'd be excellent.
Website.
Boards and commissions. And then we'll scroll down, Lunenburg Municipal Designs.
But before we start screen sharing, I wanted to speak a little bit
Okay.
first. Okay. Whatever works.
You can speak.
All right, so first, good evening. I met with you guys a little while ago to talk to you about this project. and just want to give you the update on where we're currently at with this. Let me start. I know the last time I was here meeting with you, I did a kind of a longer history. I think it's relevant, especially relevant now, to talk about what the problem is that we're trying to solve, because I think that's where it starts. So going back in time, the T.C. Passios School, and this is where some of this conversation begins. The T.C. Passios School was transferred from the school department, as far as care and custody of that building, was transferred from the school department over to the select board. That then triggered, on the select board side, what we could do with that building. That started what we called a T.C. Passios Design Committee, in which we looked at how we could purpose T.C. Passios to be a municipal building and serve municipal functions. It's roughly a 55,000 square foot building, so it's a very large building. We engaged in this process. Funds were appropriated, in which we had hired an architectural firm to be able to conduct some analysis of that building and how we could move in there. The municipal building, before we were called Municipal Building Design, the T.C. Passios Design Committee met with a variety of community stakeholders, end users, people who were desiring space in the building, and ultimately where we landed was we had all 55,000 square feet basically filled. We had a price tag of about $23 million. We did our cost estimation about 8 months out of town meeting. We hit the pandemic and a whole bunch of other stuff. Costs went through the roof, and by the time we were ready to come before the town in May, that cost had skyrocketed to about $29 million. And so it was a rehabilitation project for the trigger there, just to state this one more time, was that the building was no longer utilized for a school building. It became a municipal building, and we looked into how to purpose it as a municipal building. We hit a very high price tag, and that process did not involve the historic buildings that we have here in the center of town. So, and I'm just going to throw the number 30 million out there, because that's roughly what it was. For $30 million, what you were spending was about 15 million of that was simply code upgrades. And a code upgrade is building still looks, uses, purpose, everything's the same. It's just meeting the current building code. Things such as the critical building systems, the boilers need to get upgraded. Piping in the building is old. We know it has lead in it. All of it needs to get pulled out. When you start touching that much of the building, you got to upgrade you meet the energy code, which is substantially different. There was no energy code when that building was built. So again, seismic controls, where you have to have steel reinforced roofs for seismic controls. So, we were at a point where, again, $14+ million were just matching these code upgrades. When you think about how to put a building back together after tearing all that stuff apart, it was a lot of money spent so that way the building would look exactly the same. There would be no exterior difference really in how it looked. But again, it was a $30 million price tag. I think that from that point, we were in front of town meeting and we decided to pass over the request for a vote. I think that we understood on the Municipal Building Design Committee, as well as I believe the Select Board understood that price tag really was just too high, too much money. And again, it didn't address Ritter, didn't address Town Hall, and so it left these other buildings that we were going to, address at a future point, but at a higher price tag. I think we also heard concerns about the implication of a project that big on what is phased as a Turkey Hill Middle School expansion that was on the horizon. I think we had a date targeted of about 2033-ish. I could be plus or minus a couple years there. But we understood that Turkey Hill was going to need a significant renovation, and one of the concerns was not boxing out capacity in debt capacity to be able to address those needs. As a property professional, coming onto a board, as what happens is you kind of fall into the lead of whatever the previous board whatever path they set you on. I was a little concerned personally that I thought we were looking a little too small, and that we should have been looking a little more broadly. Nonetheless, coming out of that town meeting, what we did was we recharged, the Select Board being the Select Board recharged that committee to being a Municipal Building Design Committee, in which it was looking at not just the T.C. Passios building, but also Town Hall, also the Ritter Building. Brooks House was part of it as well. And again, something that, just to remind the population, we did not have a facility director. We did not have Chris Ruth, that kind of high level, high skill set level on staff. That department was created while we were going through this process. It is wonderful that we have Chris Ruth, just want to highlight that. Some processes probably would have been changed if we would have had that position in town. And I'm glad that I advocated heavily for that, as well as others. And I'm glad that the town ultimately created that department. So the problem that we're trying to solve initially was how do we repurpose the TC Passios? But here's the real problem that we're trying to solve in Municipal Building Design Committee. This building, I think people drive by it, they've been seeing it their whole lives, but let's talk about what it really is like to work and live in this building. Not live, but work in this building. We know that all of us who sit on the stage at night, it's freezing cold in here, especially when it's cold outside. It's even colder in this room. We have minimal insulation, as we know, in this building. If you go into the attic space, you can see all the little holes that look outside. All the clock winders know it. Anyone that gets to go outside knows that this building has some concerns. It was a former church that was moved to this site, jacked up. We added the first floor to it back in the 1800s. But this town has never actually built a town hall. So certain things have been addressed in the basement portion. We have a dirt floor underneath in the basement of this building. We've had in the past a series of sewer leaks that were in the basement of the building. So the problem that we're trying to solve is modernizing the building, trying to make sure that it's properly heated. We know we're wasting money every winter when we turn the heat on. The staff who work in this building, it's freezing cold. Anyone that's near a window, a lot of space heaters get utilized in this building on a regular basis. It's not ADA compliant. And I know that many people who are in ADA, America with Disabilities Act, that's the federal law. There's a state version. I think it's called the AAB or something like that. But it's not an accessible building. So if you are a person who has mobility issues, you have to come into the building along the ramp on the side, a ramp which, by the way, isn't even fully on our property. Most of it is on the neighbor's property. But you have to come into the building on the side entrance, and then you can utilize the lift here to get to the floor. If anyone wants to go press that button and see what it sounds like if someone actually were to use that lift in a meeting, you can get an idea that it's really, you make quite the introduction. Part of what American with Disabilities Act is for, and this is law, so it's something that I actually agree with and like, but it is the law, is that you have to give people the dignity of coming in the front door. Everyone from all mobility types. It's really not acceptable to say to someone, you are a first-class citizen, you get to come in the front door. You are a second-class citizen, you come in the second and side door. That's just not acceptable. And so what we're trying to also solve is making sure that our buildings are accessible to all people of all different mobility concerns. Ritter Building. Ritter Building was a library. It was a library. We built a new library. Then we repurposed it as being kind of Town Hall Annex B, essentially. It's where all of our facility-related municipal, and we call them in the trade, inspectional services. It's where the building commissioner, land use director, board of health, all those types of services are housed at. Again, it's a building that was donated. It was built in the early 1900s. It's a couple feet off of above grade, and so even with the addition that was done in the 1960s, which is how currently we enter that building, again, it's not accessible. You have to walk up some stairs. If you were a person with mobility concerns, you need to come into the entrance on the back side of the land use department, knock on the door, wait for someone to open it, come through someone's office area before you can actually have access into the building. And again, you're not giving people the dignity of walking in the front door, which is a problem. You say hey, if you are able-bodied and excellent physical mobility, no mobility concerns, you get the front door treatment. But if you are not, then you have to suffer through waiting there. I would encourage, if anyone wants to experiment with this, what it's like to try to come in these entrances. Just try. Sometimes you will wait, especially if someone's on a lunch break, someone's not there, you're going to wait for a little bit of time. So, I think that also with Ritter Building, you know, when you repurpose a building, when you change the use of a building, you know, things change. There's a reason why the ceilings or the walls in that building don't go all the way to the ceiling. The reason is that it was an old heating system, and when we put the staff purposes in there, we would have had to dramatically change the heating system in the building. That was cost prohibitive, and so to kind of reuse existing, the floor, the ceilings, just the walls didn't go all the way to the ceiling so that we can distribute heat around the building, similar to what it was like when it was an open library. Now we have had some upgrades to that building. We have put in some heat pumps, some other things to help out with that heating system. But the problem that we're trying to solve there as well is making it a functional office building, making it a functional building that better meets the needs of the community. So, you know, without any type of investment into these properties, they are deteriorating. Just like in your own home, you have to make improvements, you have to make upgrades. I think these buildings, we keep slapping paint on them, so they look pretty decent to people who drive by. But Ritter being an example, when it snows, we get snow into the building. We get rain into people's offices. When the wind's blowing, it blows papers off people's desks. No, I think we all can agree that that is wasting our money. But not just wasting our money. Let's talk about like the human side of this, which is, you know, when you're working in a substandard environment, it does not exactly make you think that you're there to do the best work possible. I'm not trying to say that our staff are not able to achieve and overcome, because they are. They absolutely are. But I think we have a responsibility to give our staff a working environment that better meets their needs and better meets our needs. So if I can summarize then, the problem that we're trying to solve is how we can preserve these buildings to be here for the rest of our lifetimes and hopefully everyone's children's lifetimes. So, you know, as we go through this presentation, I'm going to show you several things, but what I want to highlight here is really some bottom line numbers here. We have an energy code now that again didn't exist before. When you start touching a certain percentage of a building, a certain percentage of the building's value, that triggers meeting the new energy code, which means that you have to upgrade everything. You got to fully insulate the building. And so simply just doing those basic type functions, you know, you're in the millions upon millions of dollars to be able to do this. So I believe that what the Municipal Building Design Committee did in this process was we tried to take the most cost-effective way to solve what we perceived as the problem, which is if you come into, let's say you are someone who's in a wheelchair and you don't know which building to go into, and you accidentally come here to Town Hall and you should go across the street. It's a problem and it's a process, and that again is not the type of community that I believe that we should be, not in 2025, and it's not the community that I think that most people would expect. And what happens is when buildings are not accessible to people, they just won't use them and they just don't show up. I remember my father wanted to come to a town meeting, God rest his soul. He refused to use this lift and he couldn't get up the stairs. And it's that type of stuff that, you know, if you are actively, and I think at a certain point, it becomes a deliberate decision. And I think if you can do something better and you choose not to, it is a deliberate decision. When you are actively discouraging people from participating in government, it is not the right approach. Now, one of the things that we've heard as far as, you know, why do we even need buildings these days? Like, why can't we just go remote for a lot of the town services? And we've heard these concerns come out of some members of the community who maybe don't fully understand that we get a lot of foot traffic in these buildings. You know, if you're a developer, and many people don't ever build anything, but if you are a developer, you're going to have multiple in-person meetings with someone to go over your plans. You're going to try to design this with your building commissioner, with your land use director, with your board of health. You're going to talk through all this stuff before you start going through the permitting process. You're going to do this in the design phase. It's a lot of meetings. If you ever want to just, hey, if you question the validity of what I'm saying, what I would say is come park outside. Come park outside across the street and just sit there. Or park yourself in the lobby of this building, sit right across from the town clerk, and observe the foot traffic that actually comes in this building. When someone has a question about what's going on with their home assessment, that there's someone that they can talk to. We all know that technology doesn't always work, and not everyone's able to use it. When you have to, do your registration for voters, you can meet with the town clerk, you can meet with the assistant town clerk. You need to do your dog registration. When you need to pay your taxes, and you want to make sure that they're paid, that it's considered. Not everyone's comfortable paying bills online, and so government needs to meet the needs of people. And if you ever want to meet with anyone in this building remotely, you can call and say, hey, can we set up a remote meeting? They'll schedule it with you. But I think that what we have is we have to be able to meet people where they are, and that's a combination of in-person, it's a combination of remote, but it is going to be here for the foreseeable future. These are the problems we've tried to solve. So in the most cost-effective way, as we've tried to approach this, is meeting with different departments, understanding their needs. There are some things that, quite frankly, I'll be honest, I didn't agree with. I did not agree with the school committee, the school superintendent, when she was adamant that the ACE program, which is 18 through roughly 22-year-olds who need additional services after they graduate high school, that they need to be co-located with their school district. It didn't make any sense to me. Right, and it just didn't follow. But I'm not an educator, right? And when you are to me, part of government is working together. I have to be able to look at you as a professional in your field and trust that you are the subject matter expert. And so at a certain point, I have to just accept that you know what you're talking about. You have a doctorate, you know what I mean? I don't have it in education. So at some point in processes, I think that the committee vetted a lot of the requests that we received. We went down from what was a 55,000 square foot request closer to about 20, I think we're at about 25,000 square feet-ish. So we went down in the square footage. We had to make some tough decisions, but at the same time, we had to listen to the professionals who made recommendations to us. And so what a good plan is it's always something you don't like, and it's something you do like, and that's the compromise. And so even as I go through what I'm about to go through with you, there are parts of this that I don't personally like, and there are parts that I really do love. But in community, we have to meet everyone's needs, and I think that what this plan does is meet the needs of the community, again, in the most cost-effective way. So let me show you how we did it. If we can start going through these slides, we'll walk through them.
Give me 1 second.
So in this process, while you're pulling that up, we were able to utilize, so in the past, we've had several studies done. I don't have the total dollar amount we've spent, but I believe to get to the point we're at today, we're about $800,000
Just
in.
hold 1 second, sorry.
Sure.
I did email it to everyone while Michael Ray started.
So we've had numerous studies, a TAPE study, a Vertex study to look at our buildings. We had, again, contracted with a design consultant as the TC Pastilles Building Committee, Design Committee. And in this round, we were able to utilize ARPA funding. We were in the utilization of ARPA funding, we brought on a really high-powered architectural firm, and that included structural engineers, mechanical engineers, because what we wanted to get was a work product at the end of this, a design, that answered as many questions as we possibly could, which is few known unknowns as possible. And I like the phrase Donald Rumsfeld's known unknowns. It's a good one. All right, so we can pull up the presentation. Let me just walk you through this a little quickly because I think that by this point, many of you have already seen this a couple of times. So this is just the overview of what we're going to be talking about. Next slide, please. And we're going to, again, crank through this.
Keep going.
Yes. Stop there. Site plan. All right. So what the site plan depicts here is it just shows what we're talking about, that we're talking about Town Hall, we're talking about Ritter Building, which is across the street, and we're talking about that larger parcel. This is a photovoltaic array. What this shows is that one of the things that we're interested in the parking lot that we're looking to build across the way is adding solar panels onto that parking lot. If the federal government stays true to what they've already passed and appropriated, there is a funding source out there in the Inflation Reduct Act that provides 75% payment for municipalities that install photovoltaic cells. This is huge. We in Massachusetts, we have a directive that's come from our governor that indicates that municipalities need to design buildings that do not rely upon fossil fuels. And we all know that we live in a unitil world where the cost of electricity is ridiculous. And so we definitely have incorporated a concept of photovoltaic solar panels, so that way that helps offset some costs. Next slide, please. So there were alternative sites that were studied previously in the Vertex report, one of the others. I mean, I think I've heard so much data at this point. I don't want to be confusing, but the Tapia Vertex, we did look at alternative sites previously, but in this process as well, we did ask our architect to look at alternative sites, and which side of the building should we be on, the right side, the left side. We heard some concerns coming out of one of the members of the Architectural Preservation District, and we really try to take that seriously. But ultimately, there were concerns if we were to move this to the side of if we were to demolish the 1960-something addition and put the building there. I think the committee voted on this, but we were concerned that it would eat the intersection, that, a large building located really close to the roads there, that just really decreases that open feel when you come up on the intersection of Mass Ave and Lancaster Ave. Next slide, please. All right, so this is basically the layout of what the plan is. And I'm gonna kind of show you, I know this is a top-down bird's eye kind of view looking at a floor plan. Not everyone is able to look at floor plans and understand what they mean. So just to kind of identify what we're talking about here, the Ritter building is that building that's right in the middle there. And to the right where we have that addition, that is the Ritter building. What we're depicting here on the left is the new town hall. To explain the shape a little bit here, and let's talk about that. So this building as it sits right now, the Ritter building is not oriented north to south. It is a little bit off. And then we have School Street, which comes down, which is not quite a north to south, east to west building either, or road either. And so to maintain some level of symmetry, when you look at it from the front side or from the, coming in from the schools going westbound on 2A, coming south, toward Lancaster Ave, even going north, to center of town, that for the most part, what you're going to see is a largely symmetrical building on the front side. We needed to find some space. We didn't want to have an odd-shaped building where the whole thing is a rectangle that's tilted to a more north-south orientation. And so what we did was we squared off the building so that way, even though the orientation's not ideal, but the building on the front is a bit squared, and then it gives us, and we have a bridge there, and then it gives us some capacity on the back side of the building to really, I wouldn't say tuck, but to have the majority of the building kind of in the backside. So it really makes use of the parcel, and that's why there is this somewhat of an irregular shape. Something that we were also looking at is how we can maximize the square footage. We have numerous iterations of this plan, but what we're seeing here is we met with the different town departments, we met with all the key stakeholders here, and what the assumption is that most people will likely enter this building from the side entrance and not from the front, from the Mass Ave entrance, but from the School Street side. So as we see that kind of gap, that opening, that doorway, that's where we expect most people to come into the building. After meeting with the town clerk, meeting with the town accountant and the tax collector, that what we did there was we put the tax collector and town accountant first, so as they get pretty good foot traffic, and then you have the town clerk next. We've also added in additional windows that the town accountant function is largely interacting with town departments, whereas the tax collector function interacts largely with the public. And so we've created 2 service windows here that are visible from both the tax collector and the tax accountant's offices. We've given them glass walls so that way there's visibility into the entire area. And it creates a dynamic. If you've ever come here, sometimes the queue to be able to pay your bills could be 3, 4, 5 people deep. It gives us an opportunity to have a secondary window there, so that way if there's a longer line, that the tax collector can come and take someone at maybe the tax accountant window. We've also been mindful of foot traffic and how that also works, so we've created that kind of opening for the town clerk, so that way we don't have people kind of on top of one another. In the middle of the building, you also have an elevator, so it's a centrally located elevator that brings you up to the second floor, where we have additional functions. On the first floor as well, you have the assessors. So it's largely the functions that already happen on the first floor of town meeting now, and then you have a bridge that divides the buildings. What we expect is that the public is not going to be able to walk from the town hall portion into the school portion, that is not necessarily going to be a walkway, but what it creates is it allows, by having that common hallway, it allows staff to come in that way, it allows there to be shared break rooms, which decreases the need for there to be duplicate break rooms, it allows for there to be shared bathrooms in the building, which also decreases some of that need. And that was some of the concept of what we were going for here. Next slide, please. And I wish I had this in front of me. I have to step over to look at it a little more. It's a little bit hard to read, but we can go to the next slide. All right. So this slide brings us up to the second floor and what we're looking at on the second floor on the town side. And I didn't focus too much on what was going on in Ritter, but I will explain that. On the new town hall, this again is many of the functions that currently happen at the Ritter building right now. This is largely inspectional services. And so what you have here is you have a larger bullpen that's been created to kind of merge that, land use has oversight over planning, over conservation. And so it merges the conservation and planning or land use departments into one common kind of area. We also have the town manager that is located on the second floor. The town manager's office, as we know, has grown a little bit from 10 years ago. So we do have a communications specialist, we have an admin, we have the town manager, we have an HR director, and so we do have a little bit of capacity there. As we look down the hall, we also have like the building commissioner would be located there, the Board of Health would be located there. And something that was important to us was future-proofing this. So allowing us to create enough room so that way in the future, if the town continues to grow, that we won't need another building, but that way we can just repurpose certain spaces for it. So the area directly facing Mass Ave, the front of the building, which now is kind of a holding area, area to kind of sit and wait, that could become a future office. Some of the space has been designated for storage in the planning area also could be converted in the future to an office. And then the whole building is wrapped with windows. I think it feeds into the concept of how important it is for people to see natural light during the working day. On the Ritter building side, what we have there on the first floor, and if we can just go back 2 slides, so I do want to speak to the school district offices here. If we can just go back 2 slides and come back to this. All right, this is it. So when you come in on the Ritter side is, again, even though it's 2 separate buildings that are connected, so we have Ritter Building School District, we have Town Hall. On the Ritter side, you come in that door, now you have a nice landing area that sometimes when parents need to come fill out paperwork, that there's a private type of cubicle-like office that they can go into for one-to-one meetings or just to sit and fill out paperwork. The ACE program has adequate room in what is identified now as the land use area. This again becomes future-proof. If in the future there's a Turkey Hill project and a decision's made in the future that the ACE program doesn't need to be co-located here, this becomes future expansion space for the district. As we look down at what happens in what we call the lower level of the Ritter building, it is a partial basement, but it is not a basement. It is just the lower level. This used to historically be where the kids section was. But we have our large, what we call MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing room. That doesn't change. A lot of the walls here don't change. Everything we could do to minimize cost was done here. But you have basically a lot of different, all the different district staff. There's a bullpen area for the admins. You have offices. Some of them are shared offices. And then we have a modernized lift in that building. If we can go now 2 more slides ahead, so I can just talk to the second floor of the Ritter. On the second floor of the Ritter, we have the superintendent's office, we have the HR director's office, and that's basically those functions that live there. And then again, we also have that initial bullpen area for the admins. The school department has, I believe, 5 or 6 different administrative type positions for different functions, and so they would be located on the lower floor and upper floor areas. And again, we've created this kind of area to contain so that way if you're using the lift, you don't have full access into all those private records and files in everyone's office, and so it's a little bit more controlled on the access side of it. There's a rear stairwell that used to be there that gets eliminated because the buildings are connected now, so there's multiple ways of egress, and so that becomes additional storage capacity. One of the cool things I want to note is that what we identify here as a superintendent's office, that we do have a time capsule in this building, and so I think that during this renovation, there's a lot of interest in opening that time capsule up and seeing what's in it. All right, next slide, please. And this is a little difficult to read on the screen, so next slide. All right, so this one is just going into a lot more, this is the basement. So one of the things that we also accommodated for was PAC. And this was a little controversial, and let me just speak to that quite bluntly. Several members of the community have been very vocal that we should not be in the business of building space for public access television. We've heard a lot of criticism about that there's a lot of interest in the programming that PAC does as it relates to broadcasting meetings like this. This is how many people become aware of what's going on in town government, is the work of the PAC. And there was concern about, how much interest is there in the content that PAC creates. And I think that, the world that we're going in, where it's a more digital world, where most content that we're seeing is online, I think that what PAC made a compelling argument for is that if they had better facilities, that they would be able to produce, they would be able to improve upon the content that they currently create, as well as create opportunities for other members of the community, students, etc., to be able to create content as well. PAC does have some money that they can utilize, and I think the plan expects that PAC will expend upwards of $900,000 or so to outfit this portion of the building out of their funds. So that's not added into the total project cost, is the outfitting of this space. Ultimately, it is cheaper to dig than it is to build. And that is the bottom line. PAC is looking for space. They don't need the windows. They need to kind of minimize sounds. And so a basement build seemed to make the most sense. I think that the ad here, it's a fraction of what it would cost to build them a building on the site. So it also allows us to take some of those, the water system, the sewer system, some of those electrical rooms. It allows us to bring them into the basement and take them off of prime real estate on the first or second floor, which is a huge deal. And so it also provides the town with capacity in the future, if needed, for additional storage. One thing that this plan highlights is that we have given ourselves a buffer here of distance from the existing Ritter building, because as you dig down, it can disrupt foundations of nearby buildings. So we do have here a buffer. The entire footprint of the new town hall does not have a basement underneath it. It is a portion, and the majority portion of the new footprint that does. So that this slide is just highlighting unexcavated portions and then how the remaining portions will be utilized. Again, stairwell coming down, 2 stairwells, and we have the elevator as well that comes down. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. All right, so this is the rendering. So this is what the building will look like as you come up Mass Ave and look at it. So we have the existing Ritter building, largely going to look pretty similar, with a couple modifications. And then we have what this building will look like. We went through this in a couple good conversations. Our architect did provide us with several options, and I think what we were trying to do is match the existing style that exists in the center of town. And we didn't want to have this, First Bank of Lunenburg type look here. We didn't want to have a congressional building type look. And so, we are using, clapboard type look here. We do have a covered patio as we go into the center of town. There are several covered porches or covered patios that we see, and so it mimics or replicates that. Also, one of the things that we understand is when you look at design standards for how to add on to an existing historical building, one of the features that the Department of Interior creates these standards, and one of their standards is that in addition to a historical building needs to look distinctively different, that you don't mimic something that's 200 years old or 150 years old, that instead you complement something that is something years old. And so I think that what we have is a complementary view here. And what we've created in front of the Ritter building, there used to be stairs there. So we used to enter the Ritter building from the stairs right in the middle of the building. Those were removed a while back, and I think we all believe that what remains there is a wound or a scar on that building. And so what we've done here is we've gotten creative with adding in essentially kind of a layered platform that says to the public that this isn't a stairway in, but it creates a sitting platform, and when there are those kind of community events or a place for staff to kind of go to and sit at. Next slide, please. This is just a rendering of what it could look like for our 300th anniversary, because of course if we do this, we should be done in time. And what great gift to give our town, but a new town hall for the first time in 300 years. Next slide, please. So this is just another rendering that kind of shows what that walkway looks like. Again, we're trying to incorporate as much natural light into this as we can, and then understanding that certain functions do occur in the center of town, and that if you're having a farmer's market and people are out and about and it starts raining, that you give people a place to kind of go stand underneath. Next slide, please. And this is looking at it coming from the parking lot area, the back of the building. So as you approach the back of the, come to the building, which is how we would expect most people would be coming toward this building, is that you have this walkway to get there. You have that covered patio or covered porch to get to that main or side entrance. Next slide, please. One consideration in the layout as well was the fire department and making sure that fire vehicles can get around this building fully. And so that was, and we're pretty close to the property lines back there. So that was one of the considerations as well, or rather one of the limitations in the plan. If you were to come in the front door, this is what you'd be looking at. And this is just kind of a sample. I know it's kind of warm colors, but you'd come in the front door and you'd be able to see, similar to downstairs, we have the different signage. You can see pretty clearly that you have the Board of Assessors on the right. As you go down the hallway, you can see the tax collector, and you can also see the town clerk area as well. Stairs that would go upstairs to the inspectional services, or you can get to the center of the building and take the elevator to the second floor. Next slide, please. And this again highlights some of the, because of the windows and helping get natural light into the center of the building. Glass does have a little bit more of a cost on the initial side of installation, but it has a much longer cost long term for maintenance. And so it allows us to wisely find a way to maintain this building. It's a surface that doesn't need to be repurposed or repainted and replaced. And again, it allows people who are coming down the hallway to be transparent, to be able to see government and know, because if you come out the elevator, you need to see kind of where you're going, so it doesn't just look like a bunch of hallways with doors. Next slide, please. All right, this is the Ritter entrance, and so this would be the new entrance to the school department. So one of the features that you saw on that previous slides was that everyone has the dignity of coming in the door, that there's no more first-class citizen entrance, second-class citizen entrance, that now you have entrances that are accessible to all. And similarly, that's the concept here, that what we've created is a sloped walkway, and that way you allow anyone, they start at the same point at the base of the stairs. If you have a mobility concern, if you have a stroller, you take this slope ramp and it lands you right before the doors. If you are able-bodied and you're able to walk up the stairs, it also lands you at that same spot. And so no matter who you are at the same landing point when you come into the building. And what's been done here is a nice covered area. The doors have been, right now, the existing doors that are on the Ritter building, a greater distance. They have to be separated a little bit more to be compliant with the ADA rules. And so a little bit more distance has been created to make that an accessible entrance. Next slide, please. And the intent there was to reuse some of the existing filled stones that already exist in that parking lot. So this, now we're getting into this building, Town Hall, which we are calling the Meeting House. And so the meeting house will largely, footprint-wise, be exactly the same, but you come in and we're showing both floors here, so we'll just talk about it. On the first floor, as you look at the first floor, what is now the assessor's office becomes a conference room, what is now the town clerk's office, and the copy area becomes another conference or meeting room, and what is now the finance area becomes a large meeting room. And so we create 3 meeting rooms on the first floor of this building. We add into the bathrooms. We also upgrade and modernize the lift that's in here, and we create some storage rooms as well. We also keep an office potential on the first floor. So again, as one of the concepts here was future-proofing, and I think that what this helps do is, in addition to the meetings that happen at night, that's something we heard in this process was that, AA meetings, Al-Anon meetings, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, it provides a space for people to be able to utilize in the community during the day. Artists can be able to display artwork and rent out a room, etc. So it becomes space that can have some potential income potential on it, as well as better meeting the needs of the entire community, which there is a demand and need for meeting space in our community. The second floor, what we create is what is now the town manager entrance to the office. This is how you get upstairs to the clock, that we create a gallery here. And then what we do in this room is we get this room back to its original footprint. So right behind me is where we have the town manager office, we have the HR director's office. Those rooms will get removed, and so this becomes a larger meeting room to, again, meet the needs of our community as we advance into the future. Next slide, please. Have to wait for the ketchup on my side. And what this shows is the before of what it's like to come into the front door. And let's just go to the next slide and go to the after. So what we're also doing is regrading the sidewalk on the front of the door. Right now, if you come into Town Hall on the front door, there's a step up, which is a problem. And so what we do is we change the pitch so that way we allow everyone from all different mobilities to have the dignity of walking in the front door or wheeling in the front door. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to quickly crank through these next ones. Next slide, please. These are the structural related slides, and we are going to see some stuff in the basement here. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Is it just not catching up?
Yeah, it's just a little slow on the side. Yep, we're here now. So what this shows is the basement. So this view is basically, if I were to transport myself 2 floors down and turn around, this would be the view looking this way. So this would be the view looking towards Main Street from the basement. And so essentially, our exterior wall is there. What we have is we have columns in the basement that are roughly about here. And so from the wall to a little past me is where we have our first support columns. What we know happens on the first floor right now is a lot of paper is stored in the finance area of this building. Next slide, please. So what the structural engineer is just demonstrating here is how they're going to remedy some of the leveling issues that we have in this building. This building is not very level, and so how they're going to do it, they got to lift, they got to replace, resecure some columns, add in additionals. That's the gist of what we're highlighting here. So we can just crank through these, and next slide, please. And there is one good photo, which I think is of our finance director's desk. Yep. So let's look at this. So one of the things that happens in this building is it's so unlevel. We're showing the finance director's desk here on the left-hand side, where most of the desks in this building, especially on the first floor, they have, because it's so uneven from one side of the desk to the other, that most people have to put, a couple inches, 2 inches or so, to make sure that they can get the desk to be a little more level. And the way to fix this is by fixing the floor. And so again, these are structural things that, I don't think anyone designs a house to have a grade difference of literally 5 feet of 2 inches. That is quite significant. And so again, these are the problems that we're trying to solve. Next slide. And this is just speaking to the entrance accessibility. Next slide, please. we're getting close to the money slide, because let's just talk about what this is going to cost us. So this is just showing some minor stuff, the ramp that's on the side of the building that needs to get upgraded and replaced, because we have splintering wood and, you know, column support, stuff like that. Next slide, please. And what this slide is demonstrating is what the attic looks like. And, you know, what it looks like in the attic is we're missing some supports, we're missing some members. We have some significant wood rot right across the front of the building. If you look at Town Hall and really look at it, you'll see right in the middle of the building, kind of right above the doors, you'll see like a little bit of a dip. And that's because what's on the back side of that is some rotted wood. And so, you know, what this does is it helps correct that and fix some of the wood rot that we have inside of this building. Next slide, please. All right, and then Ritter Building is in great structural condition generally. That's the gist, but let's keep going here. Next slide. But you will have some minor changes to the building here as well. Again, for the most part, these are full guts. To be able to meet the current energy code, you need to do a full gut to do it. And so these are full guts. And I think the thought process is if you have to do a full gut to meet the current energy code and other things that are triggered by this, you know, you might as well make some improvements while you're at it. Next slide. This is just demonstrating the attic of the existing Ritter Building. Ritter Building was built for books, so it does have a higher pounds per square foot. It is one of the highest standards for buildings that you get is libraries because of how heavy the books are. And so this building is really structurally sound. Next slide, please. All right, and this just kind of shows you know, as the engineers were discussing this with us, the extent of the new construction and how big that actually is. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Like I said, we're going to crank through some of these. Next slide. This is just demonstrating some of the underpinning that's going to happen during construction. And then this just kind of demonstrates in the new town hall how the new town hall would be built. You know, that it's going to be a steel frame building, et cetera, et cetera. But it will have, you know, a lot of wood in it. Next slide. All right, and next slide. I think we're getting the money slide here. All right, let's talk money. So how much is all this going to cost? Bottom line, about $22 million on the high end. So let me break it down. Let me break this one down. So we have a cost estimate of what the actual construction is going to cost. The actual construction is going to be somewhere around $13 or so million. However, we are a state entity. We are a municipality, so we don't get to do what everyone else gets to do, which is just hire a contractor and get it done. That there's other requirements that are on us. So when we talk about contingencies and escalations, you know, we know that something this big is going to take some time to build, that the costs are going to go up, so we need to account for escalators. What is the building material cost today? What will it be when this project is complete? We need to account for that. The other thing is there are some unknowns here. Some of the unknowns are, you know, how far down the ledge actually is. And we did not do soil samples, so there's going to be a need to do soil testing. And we may, I think the information we have is we don't believe we're going to hit ledge, but if we do, then we're going to have to, you know, do some of the extra work because of that, or make modifications to the design. And so we are carrying some cost related to, again, the known unknowns of what we do know we don't know. And then you also hit another thing of construction supervision. We also have like hazardous material abatement. We know that we have hazardous material in the Ritter building, a little bit in this building. We believe it's isolated to the windows in this building in the basement only. I think we have some analysis of where it's at the Ritter building, but we're going to need to do a full hazmat survey again, and we're going to need to identify what those removal costs are. So again, these things go into the known unknowns, things we don't today know what they're going to cost, but we know that we got to carry some money for them. We also have to hire basically a project manager. With this dollar amount, the state says we need to hire an OPM, someone who's going to come in and make sure that we're spending the taxpayer money correctly to the tune of another 5 to 7% of the project. And so this is a requirement. We can't get out of this. And so this is also here. We also have some alternates here of what it's going to be if we were to move forward with those photovoltaic cells. If we were to, the building code requires us to plan for, I believe it's 21 EV charging stations. And so based on the parking calculations, we have to put in the roughage, the conduit for 21 charging stations. We think we're only going to need like 2 or 3, but we still have to plan for them to be able to be added at some point. So this isn't putting in 21 charging stations or the wiring, it's putting in all the conduit so that way at some point in the future we could put them in. And so what this add alternate cost is if we were actually going to put in 21 charging stations. And then we also have a cost here of the, what was that one? Basement, meeting house basement slab, that if we wanted to get rid of the dirt floor that's in the basement here and put concrete instead, that's what this cost is. I'm taking a lot of time, so let me try to speed this up here. Next slide. Oh, this is the last slide. Let me keep talking then. So what you want to ask me about is how much is it going to cost per household? So at $22,300,000, assuming the high dollar value here, let's go into it. If we were to do a roughly 30-year bond, the average cost per household would be $303 during the life of repaying that. If we were to do a 20-year bond, the average is going to, there's some variance here by the year, but generally the average price of the household is closer to $400. Many years it's about $385. So this isn't a true number in the sense that we have some debt that's already there that is coming off the books. So, what we have to do is really analyze, and I think we'll have these numbers coming soon, is analyzing it with the debt that comes off and the new debt coming on. How much is this really adding to everyone's bill? Because, for example, this year, we know that we have about $300,000 or so dollars in debt that comes off. Am I correct on this one? I don't see the town manager in here yet. Thank you. We have about $300,000 in debt payments that we're making that are coming off the books. And so as new debt comes on, like I said, it's not quite an add. It's not necessarily a full add, because if debt comes off, you're replacing debt with new debt, if that makes sense.
I do want to point out, I think you're quoting the 300 is the
On the regular debt.
regular debt, but we also have excludable debt.
Correct.
That's coming off.
Yes, and I'm speaking to excludable debt.
Yeah,
So
I don't know what that is. I did.
Yeah,
for that.
so that is something we met with bond counsel. We did ask for that analysis, and we do expect to have that soon. But again, we know that we do have some debt expiring,
Yep.
and so like I said, it's not a true ad. But I think it's fair to tell the public what this is going to cost them, and what it's going to cost them if a 30-year loan is about $300 a household. If it's a 20-year bond, rather, it is closer to $400 a household. What I'm showing here is year one would be the most costly year, $514. And then as you go down, year 2, $492, year 3, $490, and by the time you get about year 2033, we're at $444, 2034, $415 a household, and in the last 10 years, it's $385 a household. So that was more of a graduated way of looking at it, that they kind of did that analysis for us. So, if we do nothing, which is always an option, right? Status quo, everyone loves it. So, if we do nothing, it is always an option, but let's talk about the risk. The risk is that these buildings are not sprinklered. we start digging into sprinklers, taking off ceilings, taking off everything, you can definitely do an add-on. But again, once you start touching a certain percentage of the building, it does have other triggers on it. But these buildings aren't sprinklered. So the worst thing you can do is if these buildings were to go up in flames, there's no natural fire prevention methods that are inside of these buildings. They will burn down. And then we will need to borrow some money and replace them. Insurance will cover some of it, but again, you know, the other thing that we have about status quo and the risk is, you know, inflation. So roughly every 2 years that go by that we do nothing, we will get a building that is 10% smaller for the same dollar amount. Or another way of thinking about that is if we want to get the same, you know, you can think of that however you want to, but basically that's the math, is it's roughly a little more than 2 years, but every 2 years or so, the building will need to be 10% smaller to keep the price the same, you know, if you can think of it that way, or you get a, you know, smaller building and then, you know, 10% smaller building for the same price, however you want to look at it. But there is risk of doing nothing, and that's always an option on the table. When we think about what it would cost if we didn't expand the footprint, if we just took everything out of these buildings and just kept them exactly the functioning that they are, we do have that in another analysis. That construction cost comes to, and if we don't do a new town hall, so if we don't do a new town hall, we just touch this building, we just touch Ritter, we keep them in the existing form, I believe in our analysis we have a dollar tag closer to $6-7 million construction cost, which means a total price tag of closer to $15 million. 14 million, I believe, but I can come back to you on that one. So, I mean, there is cost, there is real implication of doing nothing, and there is cost of if we just keep doing business the way we're doing it. But again, one thing we didn't account for is if we were, what this plan does is it allows us to build a new town hall. It doesn't give additional cost for the relocation of staff during the construction because we're building it new. And it allows everyone to then move from this building into that building, and then we can work on the Ritter building and work on town hall. So minimal displacement of staff during the construction phase. If we were to have to displace our staff for 18 months to reconstruct this building and the Ritter building, there would be a multi-million-dollar or $1 million plus cost that would be added into this project that we are currently not accounting for that displacement of staff. So, you know, we did not do a lot of analysis on what it would do if we didn't do this plan, but based on the numbers, we can back out a couple of numbers to figure things out, and we figure out that, you know, I can definitely get back to you what that backed out number is. Let me not speak out of turn, so I can get back to you on that. That is it. Thank you for the hour. Any questions you have for me?
All right, start it.
Yeah, I got a couple. So just say thank you first, because that was a great presentation. You guys obviously did a lot of work on that. The rendering that you showed in the funding, is that funded as rendered? So like the money that you're asking for the new facility, will it look like what the rendering shows?
So there's a yes to that, but there's also a no to that. So let me tell you the yes. So the yes is what we are depicting is exactly what we've priced out. So our cost estimate is going off of the photos we're showing. That is what we will be buying for roughly $22+ million. That is a yes. The no part of that is there's another phase of this. So if we approve all this funding at town meeting, what then happens is we need to get to construction documents. And during that process of getting to construction documents, there are always modifications in design. Because now, you know, in this plan, this is showing what it's going to look like, but we're not accounting for, you know, where's the wet stack going to be, you know? And when you start putting plumbing through buildings, rooms start getting, you know, you start getting little columns in them or different things. And so those have some cost, you know, to make up square footage. You might make additional minor modifications. And during that process, again, you may have members of the public that say, I like this, but let's just make a little minor tweak. You also have changes of membership of boards that members of the boards can also change. But I think the sales pitch to the town is if you sell the town in a building that looks this way, it needs to look substantially similar to what we're showing it. That is an absolute, but I do expect realistically some minor changes coming out of the construction document phase.
Okay, yeah. No, I've just seen construction documents, and then when it's all said and done, it's completely, it's like, this is a doghouse, you know what I mean? It's-
Yeah.
So this would add a considerable amount of square footage to the town, you know, as far as buildings go. I mean, you're adding a whole new building and such. Did anybody do a cost analysis on what it's going to take to take care of that, over and above what we have now?
Yeah, so the short answer is limited. So it is very difficult to evaluate without the specifics of what is your heating system. We have some ideas based on the mechanical engineer, but it's very difficult at this phase of the project to give exact costs for what maintenance will be. However, as we go into town meeting, I do expect that we'll have certain costs identified, like cleaning costs, some of those basic maintenance. One of the things we considered with this walkway was decreasing the need for snow removal around the building, because we've put a walkway up that kind of flows into the road. And so that was something we thought about. We also thought about with the solar panels over the parking lot, making snow removal easier, because you have a lot of area that naturally won't get snow. So those things were cost considerations that went into the design, but I am not able to stand before you today and say to you, this is what this building will cost to maintain. And I also think it would be wrong for me to do that. I think if I were to go back 3 years ago and say, this is what the town's going to cost to run in 3 years from now, and this is what the school's going to cost in 3 years to run from now, I would have been dead wrong, and I think I would be dead wrong to tell you that I have a good estimate of maintenance. But what I feel confident in telling you is that we've considered that, and we've tried to do everything we can to minimize cost throughout this building for maintenance.
Okay. Yeah, and I think you'll find the raised up solar panels have the opposite effect you think they actually do, because you have to clean them off or they will slide off on people.
Yep.
So I've seen that happen at customers, and it's a lawsuit waiting to happen, to tell you the truth. Just last thing on the car chargers, did anybody address rebates, incentives with Unitil?
So the answer is no. However, we know that they exist. Okay. So what we are expecting in this process is, it is a code requirement. We know, and I'll stand here today and tell you that, and I think anyone from the Parks Commission will concur that you should apply for a grant once you kind of have your building approved, so that way you take advantage and actually get to touch that money. One of the things we know is that there's a lot of money out there to be supportive to these kinds of projects. As I mentioned, if the federal government comes through in the IRA, we know that most of the costs for what would be a photovoltaic cell would be reduced. We know that the state is coming out with a new program that's helping municipalities fund municipal buildings, similar to how they support the schools. They're looking at like a 25% model outside of the CPA for municipalities. There's all sorts of grants that are out there, whether they're through utilities, whether they're through the government, that will need to get explored. But in this phase of the process, we don't have that. But I think it would be, as a member, as a taxpayer, I think we will be working quite diligently to find every available dollar we can to get the ultimate cost reduced.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm somewhat familiar with that design, but I have a question. You said that the total renovated space is going to be 25,000 square feet?
Roughly. I don't have that.
Right.
I should have brought that with me.
No, that's okay. Do you know of that space, how much square footage will be designated for meeting space? Because I know, the reason I'm asking is, and I'll tell you the reason. So, there's a lot of, I have heard questions about, we're adding space that we don't really need now, but there is a plan and built of meeting space that outside what we have here, there's no other meeting space we have a little bit on the radar. I'm just wondering how much of the new space is meeting space versus office space versus what we have now.
Okay. So let me explain these numbers a little better, because the total square footage as we've designed it for the new town hall is roughly about 12,000 square feet. So that's the add. But when you take that, you add it to the existing 5,500 that's here, the 6,500 that's there, that's how I'm giving you that rough number of about 25. And you can do my math, I'm a little off, but that's roughly how I'm getting there. So the actual add is not as significant. To answer your question, this entire building would be reserved for meeting space, which is 5,500 square feet. Right now, we have one room that's roughly 1,000 square feet. I hear someone behind me saying it's 6,500 square feet. So, I mean, I could be getting flip-flopped in my building. So I'm telling you, it's getting late. I had a lot of numbers in my head. So I will owe you these exact square footages. I apologize tonight in this presentation not having them for you.
The presentation does have the square feet.
On them, they're listed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all throughout the whole
For the-
slide.
For the 3 conference rooms and
Oh, gotcha.
the hearing room.
But it is a notable add. Right now, we have this room, we have a meeting room that's in the Ritter. We have 2 meeting rooms in the Ritter right now that are really small. And so, you know, one of the things we thought about is if we're removing 2 meeting rooms over there, we need to replicate them and make them grow a little bit. Another concept in this, again, cost effectiveness, was we didn't want to put meeting rooms in the new town hall. And part of that was, it's a larger building to have to heat at night. When you had to heat the common hallways and everything else, whereas, this building, it's smaller. And so if you can shut down the Ritter Town Hall at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, every night, get those temperatures down, it's a cost savings. Whereas, this building, you got to keep it going all day. And it's just a smaller footprint to heat and cool.
As related to the maintenance cost, I know when you're looking to buy a house, which is not commercial, usually new construction will be, I think, plus X amount for square foot. And the understanding on that is that for the next X number of years, you're not going to have to do maintenance that you would if you buy an existing home. Is there something of similar nature on the commercial world so that we can kind of do the reverse of how much maintenance is going to be building versus, now we're going to have 3 buildings fully renovated versus every time we look at the capital plan, that is, several projects for these buildings. So now we're going to be able to kind of delay some of that because a lot of what we would be doing for maintenance is going to, we're buying ourselves some of that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, in the professional world, yes, we do calculations for what commercial builds cost to maintain. However, I think that in the private world, that there is more of a financial incentive to actually maintain buildings. And in the public world, I would say the premise that we've been maintaining these buildings is a little false, because we haven't been. We have not been investing enough money into the maintenance of these buildings. We pay the electric bill, we pay the gas bill, and we skip by on everything else we possibly can.
Right.
And I think that part of the design here is recognizing that that's the pattern, and so trying to minimize opportunity for there to be areas that need to be maintained regularly, like some of the flooring choices, for example. We're not putting hardwood floors in the new town hall because they got to get refinished and maintained.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm thinking is, by doing these buildings with excluded borrowing, we're actually going to be able to use what we use for our free cash
Yep.
for capital planning for other projects that right now we're squeezing in with capital planning on trying to maintain buildings because at that time
Yeah.
I'm going to have 3 buildings.
It will eliminate like roof replacements that may be coming up that, I don't know off the top of my head what the long-term capital plan is, but yeah, it would eliminate roof replacements, boiler replacements, things like that. But I mean, certain things are on the capital plan going into this town meeting, like window replacements here or
Here
next
and the
next
Ritter.
door. And we were banking on those going through because they are not accounted for in our numbers. And
Okay. I have the spreadsheet open for, in 2023, we finished paying off the public safety and the primary. Right now, in FY '24, we finished paying, funny enough, the elementary and high school heating system, which is the high school that we demolished a few years ago. And the library, this year is the last year of the library. So, all right,
Yeah.
that's all. Thank
Which means, I mean, if you look at what remains, it's largely the real debt that we have remaining is for the middle high school. That is a significant driver of the existing debt.
Yeah, and the pavement management plan.
Yes.
We still have some of that on that, yeah. Okay,
I
thank
have
you.
two questions, and you didn't take them this time. That's great. I've been working with the city of San Diego on this exact same project for 4 years. It's been voted down 3 years in a row. And it was just approved last week for a new build for their city hall. The reason it was voted down is because it didn't really offer anything for the residents that are going to be paying the taxes. It was all about offices for all of us, all of our city, all of the town workers, things like that, maybe a couple of meeting spaces. They did modify their plans this year to include more residential activities that these buildings can use, and I think that pushed it over the edge to get it voted to yes. Is there any type of plan that you might think of that you could implement to kind of give something back to the residents? Because I know that I don't go to City Hall that much unless I come here or I come to pay a bill. I'm not coming here to like hang out, sit on the front lawn. I'm not doing that. So like, is there anything that you can offer for the residents? You're going to say, hey, you're going to be paying $400 a year. Going forward, what are you going to give them?
Yeah, I think that what the residents benefit from are a couple of things. Number one, the meeting house. When we heard and we met with members of the public, and we met with nonprofits who said we have nowhere to meet, right? I mean, what we heard privately from people, not so publicly, was about like the support groups, right? Like the mental health, the support groups. We heard about that. And we heard about people who have like supervised visits with their children. It's not always comfortable doing that in the police station. And so it creates an opportunity for them to be able to do that. We heard from the farming community that they want to have a more permanent type home for a farmer's market. And I think that, this provides an opportunity to really do that. But I think the real thing that I would say is that when this gets done, the real benefit is that this is off of our shoulders for the rest of our lives, which means that when we got to talk about everything else, we can talk about it. That we can do bigger things if we can just move on from this. And I think that leads into what happens with the school, right? That, some of the things that we've discussed as a community center and what we want to see in a community center. And Turkey Hill would be a wonderful location for a community center. It would be, because it's a large building. You have the commercial kitchen that's over there. It's a pretty building. You have the gym. So, you can remove a lot of what's in TC Passios, relocate it to Turkey Hill, separate entrances. It frees up that whole campus to be a school campus if that's what the public wants. But what I would say is that this is one component that's part of the whole that really frees us up in the future. And I don't disagree with you. And that's why I think, a big chunk of this is making more community type space. The gallery that's out here, that was something important for artists to be able to rent that out, display their artwork. It creates that kind of opportunity that today just isn't there. But I do, again, think that one of the concerns that we've had is, and we've talked to the school committee about this, is, I've said a long time, we don't have a problem with what to do with old town buildings. We have a problem with what to do with old schools. That we keep, we spend so much money on these old buildings and holding them up together by strings that we never intended to be for a municipal purpose. And I think that as we go forward in planning for future schools, that we need to figure out disposition before we do new builds. And I think that what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, municipal buildings, we have a plan for what we're going to do. We're not going to leave a building that's just sitting here. So for someone in 10 years from now to figure out what to do with it, that we're figuring it out today. So, and I think it creates a good model for how we should be doing things going forward. So I think what the residents get out of it is a lot. They get the efficiency of their tax dollars, that if you do this project in 7 years from now, it will cost you more than $400 a household. So let's just get it done now.
My advice is to add something like that into this presentation when you present it
Definitely.
at a town meeting of what they're going to be able to use the space for individually. I think that'll win people over a little bit instead of just seeing offices for town
Correct.
folks, town employees. My other question is, I love the idea of public access having their own space. I know they have a certain amount of money in their reserve that pays for their salaries. If they push all that money into the space, will the town now be responsible for giving them the budget for their salaries? Like, I think that you know,
Yeah, that's our expectation. So they're not deficit spending for salaries, as I understand it in the PAC, that what they do is they get a certain percentage of basically everyone's Comcast Xfinity bills, and they get to utilize that money for needs. And so they've banked this. And so it's money that they are prepared and willing to invest in space. And so our expectation is that they will expend those funds for this build, but that it won't have an operational impact on their ability to keep doing the great work that they do.
okay, so they're using those funds to pay their salaries now? But
Yeah.
if they put all those funds into a building,
They're not putting all their funds.
they're not putting all of it. They're
Oh, they have a
putting
reserve.
million. They have more than $1 million.
Yeah.
That's lovely for them.
Change earnings.
Okay.
My understanding is that they have about $1 million. You would know more than I, but they have about that banked. I don't know what their operational budget is year to year, but as we've worked with them, our understanding is that they have about $800,000 to $900,000 available to build out the space.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if we go back to their presentation, they probably had it in there.
Okay.
Just
Want to make sure that they're not putting all their money into something and then they're going to be like, oh no, we
Yeah,
need
but
money from
that,
the
I do
town.
remember them saying that, though, is that they take the interest off of that money to pay
All their
a lot of
salaries.
their budget. And so if that drops down, they're gonna
Right.
shortfall themselves on the interest. So
That's what I'm
that is
thinking.
something we have to keep in mind.
Yep.
That's it for me. Thank you.
And I will add as well, the presentation you saw tonight is a presentation that was prepared by our architectural team. And we will have a different
There's no
presentation.
part in this. I could feel it from you.
Yeah.
I don't see it in that. this.
Yeah, there will be a different presentation at town meeting. Yeah.
I'm all set.
Good to see you, Jay.
You too.
Please give the missus my
Good
regards.
presentation.
Michael, I'm just having a hard time seeing how a building like that is going to fit next to Ritter, the way it's pictured. I mean, there's only so much grass there, so how is that going to fit there and not impact the road and not impact?
So it fits. The answer is, as you look at School Street now, that entrance to the driveway is exceptionally wide, and that's because there used to be a fire department back there. So when you look at the entrance to School Street now, where that median is, the island in the middle, that road entrance will get decreased. So that way it will just be kind of a two-lane road going back, and this building will sit on what is currently roadway. That is kind of the left half of that entrance. So it is going to eat up some of that, what is now the entrance into the School Street lot, but it fits. But the road gets smaller. That's the answer. The road gets notably smaller.
I think if I were to describe, because I'm not an engineer, sometimes you go inside some of the buildings and you walk, especially in Boston, and you're like, where is this building? There was such a smaller door. That's because a lot of the construction is in the back. So the frontage, it looks relatively small to the added space, but it's really because what he's saying is that the building actually expands in the back, the larger footprint that way.
Yeah, so we were utilizing lot lines and minimum distances. So several years back, we created the Architectural Preservation District. And one of the changes in that, and this was done by the voters, was to allow structures in the center of town to be closer to the road, quite closer to the road. And so buildings are able to, this would be one of the first builds that kind of takes advantage of the new rules, but it does allow the building to get a little closer to the road. But I personally would be concerned if it was on the other side, because I like the feel of that kind of setbacks when you hit the center of town, how all the buildings now are set back away from that intersection. You feel like you get good 360 visibility no matter what direction you're coming from. And that was something that was mindful for why it's located where it's located. But it is, I would imagine the address would probably be a School Street address instead of a Main Street address. But are you expressing, Jean, concern about the size of the building? It looks too big? I don't know how to overcome it. I think that, we have to work with the parcels that we have, and the parcels that we have are here in the center of town largely. Several years back, there was a huge focus to keep our municipal center here. We did look at, years ago, the select board did a survey for what to do with 30 School Street. because we heard from a lot of people, they're like, why not put this at 30 School Street where the old school used to be? And we did a survey at town meeting, and again, people make recommendations and decisions, and you just kind of have to go with it, and that builds off. But the results of the survey, bottom line, was, do you want to see a town hall over there? Do you want to see senior housing over there? Do you want to see a parking lot with green space? Do you want to see a green space with a parking lot? And what won out with more than, and we did a ranked choice survey to make sure that we were actually capturing what the majority really wanted, and the answer was parking lot and green space. So I think if the direction was town hall, then we probably would have marched in that direction, but that wasn't the guidance that we received as a survey that we did at town meeting. But again, there's parts of this that we all like, and there's parts of it that we don't like, and so it's how do we compromise on a solution? And I think this is the best compromise we can get, but I did meet with the Historical Commission, and their main concern that they vocalized to me was that it was too big for that building, that the Ritter building should be the highlight, and that we should not be shadowing that building. And that was their concern. And I understood that concern, and they really wanted to see this at 30 School Street. And I think that many people who've lived in town for a while would like for this to be a little further back. But I think that we also know that there's a lot of interest in the parental crowd to have more playing fields, to have more green spaces. We know that as a town is really dense in the Whalum area, that they don't have community gardens, they don't have a pavilion to have family get-togethers. And is Ritter lot better for that, or is 30 School Street lot better for that? It's probably 30 School Street lot would be better for that. So I think that in thinking about like all town needs, I don't know if the greatest and best use of 30 School Street is a building. But the only thing, in my opinion, that you really can do with that Ritter lot is a building. So I wish I had a better answer for you, Chief. Chris.
Yeah. So good presentation. Obviously, I know all the work that's gone into this over the years. And I want to thank you. I might as well do it now. For all the work you did on this, and I don't know that you'll come before the Finance Committee before you're, a citizen again, and maybe then you'll never come back. I don't know. But I do want to thank you for your time on the Select Board and this committee as well. And
thank you.
I have enjoyed our interactions over the years, even when we've disagreed. It's been good.
As have I.
I kind of sent you this, a couple things earlier, and you kind of hit on it, and I'm not sure if I'm directing this at you or maybe town manager and Ezzy as well. I think one thing that's going to be important for this town meeting is that we delineate the aspects of operational budgets in the levy that we put on with the excludable debt as well as regular debt, and kind of lay out, the fact that we have policies in place, that, we have no more than 4% regular debt. We have no more than 11% excluded debt, and no, in combined 14%. And that policy has been in place for quite a while. I think you hinted on, you talked a little bit about it, but we don't have it in front of us, is what would that look like with this project as well as Marshall Park project? Would we be approaching those limits or not? What would the borrowing look like? I think you always have to have that kind of excluded debt, probably at a pretty high level, because, like you've already mentioned other projects that will come, which are like a new school building at some point. What will happen once we bring down TC Passios into whatever state that is going to be in the future? It's going to go on and on and on. So I think that that's a critically important thing for us to get out, probably even in advance of town meeting and then whatever we have for a vote. So not really a question, but just something that relates to the two that we're hearing tonight. I know they were also talking about perhaps the track, right? And maybe that just becomes a regular debt kind of item. I don't know the answers to all of those, but I think that's a critically important thing to put out there, right? And as Anna had mentioned, we have retired some, so this kind of just fills it in, right? So, otherwise, I think all the questions I had were asked, and I don't have any other questions. It has been our tradition, though, that more recently is that we do ask if anyone in the public has any questions. They have showed up, so I don't know if anyone in the audience has. Okay.
Rhonda doesn't have anything for me? Oh.
Hello, Glenn McLeod, 436 Reservoir Road. Just a clarifying question, and also thank you, Mr. Jeffries, for all your work, echoing the comments of the the chair, as well as the committee. And I do just have a simple question now. But that's a couple times you had said the cost per household would be $400. Could I write my check for $400 right now and fulfill my obligation?
Go fund me? Are we going to go fund
You can always volunteer money to the town. Very few people do, but I don't know how that works. That's an Izzy question, but until it's approved, $400 is going to go sit there.
I guess my point was, and member Dahl had brought it up, is that it's $400 per year.
Correct. Yes. This is $400 per year. That's correct, and for quite some time. I think when I went over, it was 20 years, $400 per year if we do a 20-year plan, $300 roughly per household per year on a 30-year plan.
Thank you very much. And in fairness to my following question, that $400 per month, would that diminish with the retiring debt?
That is per year, not per month. So what I'm noting is that this is what the project itself cost is, but I think that what we need to demonstrate is how this ties in, as Chris noted, with the remaining debt. We can say that debt's going to come off and that this may not be a true add. That's going to be true in several years. But when you add in the debt, then it is a real add. So I think the good way that I'm going to think about it is this is a $300 to $400 add a household, and it depends on which option we tend to go with. But that's all based on the analysis in the background of what else needs to come on in terms of, do we do this in a 20-year, do we do this in a 30-year? It is tied all into that. But I do think it's fair to give an analysis of some of that debt and what it really adds.
Thank you very much. So being at the Selectmen's meeting on Tuesday, I know there was and again, in fairness, back of the napkin calculations as it relates to if in 2 years the town went for the Cadillac of overrides to fully fund the schools and fully fund the town. Was that number, again, back of napkin calculations, about $800 per month?
I'm here tonight to speak to the Municipal Building Design Committee plan, not about an override. I can do some back of the napkin calculations for you, but I shouldn't. All right.
All right.
Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you tonight. I know I'm a long-winded person, and luckily I'm getting out of politics, and so you won't have to worry about hearing this too much more. But Chris, I want to thank you as well for really leading a wonderful committee here. You've been great to work with. It's been wonderful getting to know all the different volunteers here in town, and this is an exciting project. I know that it triggers a lot of what ifs, but when we think about how we landed here, the cumulative thousands of hours of work across so many volunteers over the last 6 years to get to this point, I think it's been a momentous effort. And my goal here as a property professional was to do my best to tell the town this is what I believe and work with others, but to get to a point where what we're saying to you is I believe that this is the cheapest, best, most effective way to resolve our problem. That has been my mission in getting involved in politics largely. I wish we would have done more on the revenue side. I really am troubled that my colleagues did not see the priority there of focusing on revenue, that non-tax revenue. Nonetheless, this has been a goal of mine to get to this point, and if the town votes it down, I still will feel confident that we did our work to give them the best option. And as we look back, if we say no and we look back on this in 5-10 years from now, someone will remember when Michael Ray Jeffries said, this is the cheapest it's ever going to get, and you're only going to spend more money the more we delay. So thank you for the opportunity, and I hope to have your support.
Thank you, Michael Ray. You know, it does remind me of one thing. You know, we came in a couple years ago about how important it was to have school air conditioning for the 4 days a year that it gets hot. Well, the people that work in this town, you know, hundreds of employees working in these conditions every single day, we should be thinking about them as well. So I know it's difficult times, but we do need people to have a good working environment and for volunteers as well. So keep that in mind as comments are made related to the need for a town hall. All right.
Good evening. Anita Shipers, Chair of the Parks Commission, and I have with me Karen Menard, also a member of the Parks Commission. And we will not be as long in our presentation. So the discussion points that we want to go over tonight with you are basically to provide you information about the updated design that we have right now for Marshall Park. We want to talk about the project costs. We want to explain to you what we're looking at for funding proposals and what we might be doing for a fallback strategy in terms of scaling back the project if needed. We do have information about what the project schedule would look like. And I'm going to discuss where we are at this point in terms of determining tax impacts for the projected borrowing. We also want to give you an update in terms of what grant application process would look like with this go-round, and we want to just briefly touch on park maintenance, future park maintenance. So next slide, please. So as you're all aware, Parks Commission has started this project of looking.
Go to the next one, please.
I'm on the next one. I don't know what.
No.
It's there now.
Is there one after that? We're on the one after that. The one that has
Slide
a map
3.
on it?
Okay.
Yep. Right.
Thank you, perfect. Parks Commission started, it was pre-COVID, in terms of looking at Marshall Park and what might be needed to be done to make sure that Marshall Park was a location that could be used by all the townspeople, all ages. And at that time, they did a lot of public input, informational meetings, gathering public feedback, and looking at options that might be available. In 2020 and 2021, funds were voted by town meeting to begin initial designs, schematic designs of what a new, Marshall Park schematic design would look like. And then the Board of Selectmen did provide some ARPA funds to put toward this project as well. That amount was originally $1 million, but I'll explain a little bit later in terms of what happened to that $1 million. When the town began working with the initial design firm of WOLA out from Western Massachusetts, WOLA helped us put together that schematic design that included all the different components of what the feedback from townspeople said they wanted in an improved Marshall Park. At that time, it included upgrading the ball fields, adding playgrounds, adding sports courts such as basketball, etc., walking trails around the wetlands, canoe launch area, and some waterfront areas where people could stop and enjoy the beauty of Marshall Pond. The number that we received at that time for the estimated project cost, we felt was within the town's ability to handle, and we were even at that time looking at perhaps getting this to be borrowed within the levy limit, not looking for excluded debt. However, when we got to the point where we needed to move on and do a more complete design, we hired the firm of RDLA out of Boston, Mass. And their upgraded design, which was based off the original WOLA design, we found out that the cost estimate WOLA had provided was woefully inadequate. It did not include many of the components of normal costs, it did not include soft costs, and as we were trying to prepare for town meeting last November to bring this forward to townspeople then, we felt that we were too far off. We were not able to move forward. The grants that we had applied for then required certain town match amounts, which we would not be able to provide with this higher cost that we now knew the project would be. So as you know, at the special town meeting in November, we did pass over this warrant article and promise you that we would take a step back and look at this. So over the past few months, we have done that. We have been working with RDLA to come up with an updated design for Marshall Park improvements. And if you look at the figure on the slide, you'll see that the updated design is basically 3 phases, 2 large phases, 1 final small phase. The blue area at the bottom of that map would be phase 1, and this would be coming off of Mass Ave. Phase 1 would involve construction of a driveway in and a number of parking spaces that would be there. It would include the playground. It would include the sports court, so it would be a basketball court and 3 pickleball courts. And it would include walking trails around that area. I don't know if you can see within that upper large section of the blue portion of the map, the skate park that's being planned and is still anticipated to be built this summer would be right in the center of this phase 1 design. And all of the design work, elevations, et cetera, would be worked and so it would tie in flawlessly. The second phase, the green area on the upper section of that plan, includes the men's baseball field and the ladies' softball field. Those men's baseball field would be a major reconstruction of the field, including all of the necessary drainage to keep that field high and dry. It also would include some modifications and improvements to the ladies' softball field. It would include the necessary buildings in terms of announcer booths, et cetera, dugouts. And it would include parking off of Chestnut Street, which is something we've been hearing from the residents in that area is necessary. The third phase, the smaller phase, 2B, would just be the addition of buildings. The 2B in the blue area would be a fairly large pavilion, which would have restroom facilities, a concession stand, and picnic area. The smaller building that you see on the left of the green area would be just another bathroom facility that would be adjacent to the ball fields for use by people enjoying the fields and the sports there. Next slide, please. At this time, the Parks Commission has voted to move ahead with all 3 phases, and that's what we will be bringing forward to town meeting in May. I wanted to give information in terms of the amount of parking. The detail that I confirmed with Karen just before we began the presentation was that in total, the parking would be roughly 120 spaces that would be added between the Chestnut Street side and the Mass Ave side of the project.
For those of you who have not been down to Marshall and don't know it as well as some of us do, the current parking situation is a dirt lot is in the main area. It's not, there's no lines and there's no marked handicap spots there. And on Chestnut Street, we really don't have any official parking over there. So it ends up being a lot of street side parking, which leads to a lot of complaints because people just don't always have the common courtesy to not park literally in people's front yards. So this would fix the problems that are going on Chestnut Street, putting those folks into a lot, but it would also open up the Chestnut Street side to the main parking side by a series of walking paths so that people, no matter where they park, could easily access both sides of that park.
There were also concerns on Chestnut Street with fire access
Yes.
and others during, okay.
Yes, there are times when people do double park or park on both sides of the road, and really is very difficult for traffic to get through there safely.
And Jay, you may remember back on when you and I sat on FinCom together years ago, Chief Marino actually showed a video during one of our Finance Committee meetings of his concerns on Chestnut Street of emergency vehicles being able to access that during sports games. He actually had a video camera, and as they drove down the street, they recorded it so we could see what it actually looked like. So this would definitely help alleviate those issues that are going on there.
Yeah, I mean, Chestnut Street becomes a one-car passage.
One lane.
One lane, if any cars are parked on either side. And some of the concerns, it's not just for the residents during the ball games, but it's actually for the players of the ball games too, because there is no access to the men's baseball field currently from Mass Ave. So emergency vehicle has to come down in Chestnut.
I'd also like to make one other comment, that we mentioned the playground facility and we mentioned the walking paths. Those would all be handicap accessible, universal entrance. Okay,
The
next
playground
slide.
would be the only one in town, right?
Yes.
No, you mean?
For full handicapped
Well,
accessibility.
so the playground over at Wallace Park is actually considered an ADA accessible playground, as are the playgrounds at both of the schools are considered. I was looking back, I was hoping someone from the school board would know, but they're not fully inclusive. And this is where the issue comes in, and this is sort of what Michael Ray was, hinting to in some of his presentation. There is a very large difference between having something that is ADA accessible and having it be inclusive. And we are aiming for an inclusive playground at this location. Hopefully that is what we will end up with. And if that does happen, that would be the only fully all-inclusive playground in our community.
Okay. If we could go to the funding proposal slide.
Ooh. Okay.
Thank you.
This one?
Yes, thank you. So based on the feedback that we had from the Board of Selectmen last fall, they had said that they really wished that as we looked for this revised Marshall Park project, they would like us to have this project be funded through debt-excluded borrowing outside of Prop 2.5 limits. And so that's what we are looking at this time. The fallback strategy for this would be, while we're hoping to go ahead with the full project, phases 1 through 2B, if we find that it's more feasible to move ahead with a smaller project, what we would be doing is modifying our motion on the town meeting floor to include just phase 1, but with the addition of that bathroom concession stand pavilion facility that's there next to the bathrooms in that blue area of phase 1. The total project cost for the full project would be $922,086. If we go with the smaller project, just the phase 1 plus the building, it would be $5,824,518. I think it's also important to note that if we do move ahead with only the phase 1, we've modified the phasing of this so that any work done within that Mass Ave side, the blue area of the park, that would still leave the men's baseball field, ladies softball field, and Little League field available to be used without any impact, even during construction. That was one of the things that we had heard feedback from the league users, was that, they were worried that even a small phase project would impact their ability. We modified the design so that those areas would not be touched, even if we did just the phase 1 project.
Would the fallback strategy also be excluded borrowing, or?
It would.
Okay.
So in terms of the project schedule, if we move ahead and get a vote at town meeting to move forward, we're looking to start with the preparing the final design package right after town meeting, and that would be finished sometime in mid to late September. That would include all the permitting that's necessary for this. The bid process, meaning preparing of the bid documents, the actual bidding period, and the bid review and award period would take place between the beginning of October and the middle of December. Construction, we would provide a notice to proceed to the contractor who won the award. That would happen in early December. And that contractor would immediately start providing material submittals for our approval and would begin purchasing and stockpiling supplies for the project. But the site work would not begin until March of 2026. And if we go through with the full project, the site construction would take from March 26th through to May 2027. If we go with the smaller project, We were told by the owner's project manager that likely that work of the smaller project could be completed in 2026, with perhaps just the wrap-up activities taking place in 2027. There are post-construction activities that need to take place. There's, punch list, contract closeout, and those would probably take place in June of '27 and July of '27. And then anytime you do landscaping at a project, there's always a one-year warranty for those plants, and that warranty would stand through May of 2028. Next, please. As you heard with Michael Ray Jeffries explaining what the project for the town hall and the Ritter building, we were hoping that we would have information tonight to give you about what the tax impacts of this borrowing would be. We are working with the town manager and the finance director and the town's financial advisor and bond counsel to try to determine what is the best scenario for borrowing on this project. It's our hope that this project would be considered eligible for a 20-year borrowing. And what we've done to make sure that we have the correct answer on whether that's feasible, we've been providing bond counsel and the financial advisor all of the information in terms of what components are part of this project, the phasing of the project, cash flow needs, etc. And matter of fact, we just gave them additional information today. They have promised that they will get us several different debt scenarios that we can work with the town manager, finance director, and with your board to try to determine which is the most feasible and most likely to move ahead with. But we won't have that information until the last week of March. Next slide, please. In terms of the grants, as you know, the Parks Commission was very successful in applying for grants based on the other project design that we had. And those grants that were awarded were a park grant from the Division of Conservation Services for $500,000 and a $1 million Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, $1 million. When we realized that we were not able to move ahead with the project last fall, because they have very definitive timelines in terms of their grant activity, we had to reluctantly tell them we were not able to take use of their grant funds. They did tell us, though, that our grant projects scored very highly, and they urged us to make sure that we come back and reapply again once we have this design ready and we know what we're looking at. We may not receive as high of a score with this modified project. We may not receive as high of a value in any grant awards that come forward, but we will reapply for them. We're very lucky that the town manager has found some funds which we can use to provide toward a professional grant writer that can assist the Parks Commission in applying for these grants. But not only that, more importantly, is to look for other grants that might be out there that would be appropriate to apply for under this new design scenario. We do plan to hold 2 public information meetings before town meeting. They'll be in April, dates to be determined. But at those public information meetings, we will have our design team there to answer questions for the public. We'll have renderings, and we will have much more detailed information in terms of what those tax impacts will be to the taxpayers. And then the last point is future park maintenance expenses. You know, we, as you've heard with Michael Ray Jeffries' presentation, how we maintain our facilities moving forward is important to everybody. You know, it takes money to build these, but it takes money to maintain these. We already have Chris Ruth, our facilities director, looking at the standard costs for the different components that would be going into this park project. Once he has a list of what those standard maintenance needs would be for each, whether it be ball field, the building, the court surfaces, playground equipment, that type of thing. Once he has all that information, then he can start putting together a comprehensive plan and a cost estimate, an annual cost estimate, so that we can provide that information to people and let them know that we are taking that seriously and that it is part of the process moving forward. And that is basically our presentation for tonight. We'd be glad to answer any questions.
On the operational side of the park, I mean, do we ever rent the fields out?
Yes, we do, and that's part of the fees that we use for paying for expenses.
Okay, and then putting in a concession stand, kind of the same thing, renting out the concession stand to,
So that would be a new one for us, and we would have to, as a park commission, sort of figure out how we wanted to handle that piece of it, because right now, the snack shack, for lack of a better word, that's down there was placed there by Little League many years ago, and it's not a compliant snack shack, so it's very limited in what they can do from there. So, you know, if this plan goes through as a commission, we'd sort of have to have a lengthier conversation on what policy and if there's any fees and things like that look like, who's going to use it, you know, that sort of thing. So we don't have one of those under us yet, so that would be new territory for us.
just curious.
I'll just add that generally speaking, in Lunenburg, concession stands usually go as a fundraiser for the groups that use it. Like, I mean, it's not as much anymore, but I think the concession stand at the high school was one that was used by different groups when there were events there as fundraisers.
I kind of have a piggyback question. As you know, my background is Parks and Rec, so my heart broke when you had to return and give back.
Yours did. Ask my husband what mine did.
Because I know how hard it is to get these grants. Just to piggyback on his question about generating revenue, does the Parks and Rec Department foresee possibly using this for like summer camp programs? Things like that could generate like quite a bit of revenue for the town, and other towns could utilize and pay to come and utilize it. With bathrooms and another outlying building, it would be a perfect place to have summer camps, full-day camps, things like that. Do you have any plans to kind of implement that onto this property?
So, yep,
Ken, you might want to get closer to the mic.
sorry, I'm not loud enough for you.
Me, but-
So that's actually part of a bigger picture. So as a little bit of history on me, when I came onto this commission 8 years ago, we were baseball. That's it. We didn't have a rec director. We had baseball fields. We didn't offer any programming. All of our fields needed work. The last 8 years have been a true labor of love in trying to get us to where we are. A few years ago, we put in a rec director. It is my hope that the town will get behind our mission of having a rec director that will become full-time, that will be able to run programming, and this would be a prime location for a lot of her outdoor activities. Right now, our rec department, when they run programming, we're using TC Passios, and we're using a combination of, I believe, a classroom and the gym. If TC Passios turns into something else, goes away, whatever, either partially or in its entirety, that leaves us scrambling for space. It's really hard when our only other alternative is to utilize school space because they have programming that use it as well. So by having this here, our recreation program would be able to grow. And we also have user groups that, you know, would be able to come through to use it. It could be another town, it could be another nonprofit, or it could even be, a private group that wants to use it from town. We will always, as far as I'm concerned, and as long as I'm on this commission, try to make sure that our facilities are open to anybody that wants to use them. So there's lots of things we can do. Is there something in the works specifically for Marshall Park? No, but there's something in the works specifically for our recreation department.
Also, might I suggest, in accordance with this town hall build, maybe you can add some recreation programs to those larger spaces. And, you won't have to use Passio School, which I've heard is not the best.
Yes. Have you been in there yet?
I have drove by.
We'd be happy to give you a tour. We know the facilities director personally. We can give you an in-depth tour of that building.
So as a town hall building, if that's new, and we have a new park, and we have.
Yep.
Working together.
One thing that I'll add that for me, it's very important. In town, we have a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot. In town, we do have quite a bit of open space reserved through conservation and trails. And in the difficult time that I have with it for all residents is that it's not very a welcoming place. These places are not very welcoming for anyone with limited mobility or even with multiple young children. Because if you're a mom with 2 toddlers, you definitely need a stroller, you need a place that is accessible. So although Lunenburg does have a lot of open space, we don't really have a community open space. And this space was designed with, adding that element to everything. So around all the baseball fields and softball fields, now there's walking paths, the open bathrooms. So it's really, the vision was you would be multi-generational, using this space at the same time and creating the means for that. The pickleball is another use, the basketball, the skate park, although we're not building, but was part of this vision of multi-generation used all day long. So I do see this space, hopefully when it's built, to be another life to our town center across the street from you.
I go there now. It's not that great.
I know, no, it's difficult, right? You're coming from one side, you don't really have a way to get to the other side. The parking on Chestnut Street is very problematic for many different reasons. One thing I'll add that I also think it's important to mention is that this is our school facilities as well. This is where our softball and our baseball teams play, our high school teams play. And it is a school facility that does not meet any criteria of school facilities that should meet. And we need to do better, for our kids. So I see it as a problematic. If we don't have that, we will need to eventually having to build this as a separate thing for the schools. And as an added point too, not just that this is a school facility, but also we do use the school facilities for the soccer program down the turf. So it's kind of nice. In Lunenburg, we have a lot of community space that we're able to work integrated with, work across multiple agencies to deliver a lot to the town. And I think we need to continue that. I love that, 115 years ago, this park was bought to be baseball fields, and it will continue to be baseball fields, and will continue serving our Lunenburg High School, and along with the added spaces with the walking paths, the pickleball, the playground, the community bathroom, and parking is a huge thing. People don't have where to park. I'll tell you, I live on Main Street, and you might have parking. You might have people walking your sidewalk too. All day long, we have people walking the very few sidewalks that we have in town. And it's still not ideal because we don't have where to park. People drive to town center, they don't have where to park and go. So I'm excited for the town, what this can be for the town.
2 votes, yes.
Well, so just to throw it out there so everybody does know, Anna was on the commission.
Yeah.
The bulk of this work was done. She was my partner in crime through the whole grant process. So, she's very well informed of this project. As I'm listening to her sales pitch, thinking, is she trying to sell this to us? Because we're already bought into it. So, yes.
Jay?
No, I'm all set. You answered my question.
Jay, you got to make up some questions. We got nothing for you?
No, my only concern was the maintenance and operational costs. which you haven't
Sure,
mentioned
and,
yet.
that is an absolutely legitimate concern. But I will say this, our parks in general, from where it was when I started on the Parks Commission to where we are now, it's a night and day difference. There was a lot of work that was not done on our parks, and we're still paying the price for that now, because there's only so much money in a budget that, Chris Ruth has to spend, that he's doing his best and doing a great job at keeping up with everything, but there's still a lot of improvements that could be made. I'm sure that the Lunenburg baseball program could tell you that there's probably $1 million improvements, $1 million in improvements that they would like to see happen at those fields. It's not in our budget to do that right now. So, if we were to move forward with this project, we wouldn't have to do that. I do not expect our fields to go backwards. I expect them to continue to go forwards because we didn't have a facilities director when I came on to Parks. We have one now, and I think the town has learned an extremely hard lesson on the importance of having a facilities director, somebody that can dedicate their time to our facilities, and right now we fall under them. So that would mean, you know, any building that gets put up, any field space, all of our playgrounds, all fall under Chris, and he has been extremely responsive when either a resident from town calls or somebody from the commission calls and said, hey, this is what's going on. I expect that to continue, and I have faith that he is putting a lot of time and effort into, and thought into what we can do to, you know, what's going to be needed to maintain this project if it is approved. So I'm not as, if you would ask me this 8 years ago, if I had brought this project to you, Jay, 8 years ago, I would be sitting there with the exact same concern saying, absolutely not, we need to get a handle on how we're maintaining things. I am confident right now that we have a handle on from the facilities on the parks right now that we would be able to maintain this going forward.
Jay, if I were to add something, to this line of thought about maintenance, and you know, the way I see the town, it's a little bit of growing pain, because when we moved to town just 20 years ago, a lot of work used to be done by volunteers. Maintenance, you know, I can name a few people that they were the ones that mowed the lawn before the kids play. So when I say it's a little bit of a growing pain, and part of that growing pain is learning what we need to do, is it's really hard to maintain everything counting only on volunteers. And I think over the past, 5 years, we're trying to learn that, because the other tricky thing too is we are still a small town and we can't afford everything. So it's really continue that partnership with volunteers, the users, people that are bringing in. Every year when we have our, the Earth Day cleanup, the Little League, the Youth Baseball League are the ones that lead Marshall, and, so we got to figure out how to do this together, because it's very costly to do it alone. So we need to tap into our volunteers, but also understand ultimately it's our responsibility as a town to oversee and maintain some of that.
Can I put a plug in for the new town hall? Because I am absolutely freezing right now. I just want to march down on the record. I am freezing.
When you add new facilities, because you're talking about bathrooms, concession stands, there are hard costs that come with that, utility costs and maintenance costs. It's one thing, volunteering to mow the lawn is different than, the utility costs. Because one thing I remember from way back is, like, with the library, when they went from the Ritter to the big library, and then they had to come back the following year because they didn't realize how much the utility cost went up.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's...
There will definitely be new, as Mike had asked about the concession stand, there's definitely going to be new components to this that we haven't, as a Parks Commission, dealt with before. And we are very aware that there will be an added cost to, the bathroom facilities, and how are those run? I mean, we have, not that I want to hash out all the bad stuff that's gone on in parks, in terms of porta potties, but, we had issues a few years back with porta potties. They weren't being locked, and people were going in them at night, and they were absolutely trashed, and then a user group, or no, actually it was one of our camps got down there to use it, and somebody opened the porta potty door before they left, and I'm very thankful that they did, and it was absolutely trashed, and that's what their child was going to be expected to use. So, we had to jump over that hurdle, and we had to come up with policy and stuff that, worked. I'm hopeful that an actual real bathroom will curb some of that, what we went through with that, because, hopefully people treat a real bathroom a little bit better than a porta potty. But that we'll have to work with facilities to figure out, what the policy and procedure is around the use of those, when they get locked up, when they're going to be open, and, what the overall cost to maintain them is. And hopefully that's something that Chris Ruth will be able to bring with him too, for one of our upcoming meetings.
I think Marshall Park is just so beautiful. I love taking my dog in there, And I just think with these revisions, it's just going to be so much better, especially when you're talking about drainage in those fields, for the kids
There's a
to play
swimming
there.
pool there right now, at least there was on Tuesday when I drove by. The 90-foot diamond had a considerable puddle of water. When we had gone in there and done some test pits when we started this process, I had gotten a text at one point, it was less than 18 inches down and we were in water. So the drainage needs there are considerable, and that's actually one of the factors that's driving up the cost of this project is the amount of drainage that has to go in. And just to answer another question too, that came up at Tuesday night's meeting with Select Board, the question was, do we have to do phase 1 first if the residents decided they would rather have phase 2? The answer is yes, we have to do phase 1 first because of the amount of drainage that has to go in over on phase 2 in those fields. We need phase 1 to come in for all the retention basins and that sort of stuff for the stormwater drainage. So it's really not possible to flip it. So the options would be either the project as a whole, or we could cut it back and just do phase 1, or if the town decides that they don't want to move forward, that would be the third option. So it cannot be phase 2. We can't flip phase 2 and phase 1.
Right.
Good. I mean, I know a lot about this project for obvious reasons. But I will say, like, I travel a lot around the world, and everywhere you go, there's a park associated with a town, right? And I don't know that Marshall Park in its current state is really a park, right? So I do think that there's a lot of value to this. There's a lot of folks that want more community opportunity in town, and kind of putting it around, the Passios building is kind of the de facto thing we do now, but it's awkward. It doesn't really work. So, and then, I think your timeline, if it were to be approved, it's in time for the 300-year anniversary. So I'm sure it would get very utilized for that as well. I did have one question on your timeline. It's maybe a little bit of a nit, but maybe not. You have a start of 5:15, but this would have to pass at town meeting and the ballot?
Yes.
When's the ballot? Is that the 13th,
17th, was it?
17th? Okay, so it's a little off. I mean, it's probably not the end of the world,
This
but.
was based on the OPM before we had discussion about the
Okay.
date of town meeting.
Okay. And again, I just want to reiterate, I think seeing that projection of debt service is important for both of these. So I'm looking forward to, you probably don't have it tonight, obviously, but.
It's critical that the taxpayers can see that things are coming off and things are going back on, or going on.
Yeah, and we really got to, remind everyone that the operational budget and the levy is different than the borrowing that goes on top of it. And if we want to continue to move our town forward and have, good facilities for everyone in town, I think that we need to do some investments in it, so.
And just to that point, talking about bond rating and things, one of the things bond rating agencies look at is a town taking appropriate care of all of its different facilities. And so by putting these types of projects forward, we're showing doing our due diligence as a town to keep these facilities that are necessary for our townspeople.
Okay. Is there any questions from the public? You guys gonna have to do the shuffle or something, Three Stooges shuffle.
Linda Lucia, 181 Reservoir Road. I just wanted someone to refresh my memory as to how much have we spent on this project so far, like the design? I know there was at least one allocation at town meeting.
3.
Oh, at least one.
So let me see if I.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't go anywhere, stay right here. Correct me if I'm wrong in some of this, and you as well, because you were the ringleader and part of this. So if we initially, the project got started with an approval of a capital planning item that was for, I believe, $50,000. Then we got another capital plan, another item on capital plan ended up being the Marshall Park survey. Then, so that first 50,000 is what got us started with WOLA. And then we went, once we got through that process, we went back to the town at a special town meeting, and it was $184,000 that got us to, allowed us to keep moving. And then the ARPA money had come in. Originally, we had gotten $1 million. It didn't matter how many times we tried to move money from one thing to another. We could not make what we had work between the grants that we had gotten and the ARPA money. So we handed back 750, no, 700,000 in?
780,000 roughly of the ARPA money. We retained about 220,000. The selectmen were kind enough to give us. That is allowing us to complete the design.
So we're just shy of 500,000, if my, how did somebody
Rough
say,
math.
your rough napkin math works?
Yeah, I was just
Something
trying to
like
get
that.
it straight in my head. I was trying to recall, and I couldn't
You know, and
come up with a number.
Yeah, and, you know, I can't speak for the building reuse committee's plans and all that kind of stuff, but even if this project doesn't move forward, not all of that money is wasted, because there is a plan here that can absolutely be utilized down the road. I can mark my words right now, Marshall Park needs an overhaul. It needs a tremendous amount of work if we're going to continue using it even for baseball. It just, the surfaces need to be redone. Things like that just need to be done, and you know, so that our players have a safe spot to play. So at some point, it's going to have to be done. So if this project doesn't make it through this next round of town meeting and the ballot, there will be usable documents that they
The
can
money
use.
isn't wasted. We have a very good plan for Murray
Oh, I
Park
wasn't
moving
suggesting
forward.
it
No,
was wasted. I was just curious.
I want the
I like
taxpayers to
numbers.
understand that, you know, we have, some of us have been through so many town meetings where, and I, you know, the building reuse is the freshest one in my mind, but how many times have we said no to that? And how many times have we said, how much money have they wasted? And I'm not sure it was truly wasted money. I think a lot of times we think that way because the project didn't go any further than it had, but I think that, you know, pieces of it are utilized going forward, and I think this is one of those that will be able to be utilized going forward, so,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, any other questions, including anyone on Zoom? All right, any parting words?
We look forward to support from the townspeople. It's a great project, one that will really benefit residents of all ages.
Great. Any final?
No,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the other topics we had originally scheduled.
I know.
I know, were other moneyed articles, which I guess just at a minimum, are there any other that we're seeing coming down?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other moneyed articles would be all of our free cash transfers, and those after Tuesday are very much up in the air. So I think it might be a little premature to talk about where those are going.
Okay.
But
Okay, but nothing else that, you know,
no other borrowings or anything like that. We did, I'm not sure that everybody is aware, there was a citizens petition that was submitted today, and the clerk has verified the signatures, and so that is for an override of a little over $2 million.
Okay. Yeah, I was aware of that. And then the next topic would be administrative unclassified debt. We're kind of following the old traditions. I don't know if these are the traditions you want to use going forward, but this is the way we do it.
Yeah.
I guess the big one on all of that is, will be this debt, like we've talked about all today. The regular debt has kind of just become part of the operating budget.
Yeah,
I don't
so-
think that's the best thing.
No, it's not the best, it's not the best way to kind of handle that. When you want to keep debt service as level as possible, so that the taxpayers aren't seeing the impact, and like Ms. Schreiber said, that you're maintaining your infrastructure. So There's a little over $300,000 that is coming in reduced debt service this year. 200, let me get my, hold on. Let me talk to specifics. Okay, so $393,881.14 reduction in debt service. $284,412 are being, of that reduction are being used to offset the capital program, so that we're keeping that one-time kind of like fund available for future borrowings. The other, the remainder of the reduction is being used to balance the budget. That's $109,469. But I think that at this point, based on new information and discussions this week, I think the overall budget is very much in flex right now.
Okay. Okay.
So, but that's as is right now. So trying to take as much as possible of the reduction in debt service and keeping it out of the general operating budget.
Okay, any questions on any of that,
I don't have questions on that, but,
or requests, or whatever?
so we haven't really seen the spreadsheet with your line item budget, is that correct?
It's in the folder, I think.
No, I was just there.
And I know, so as he just made changes to it today, I mean, I will say that everything is probably going to change a little bit, but not everything. I'm probably overstating that, but I believe it's in there, is it not?
On the main FY budget,
All right, so I guess maybe your request is let's make sure it's there.
yeah, because on your last presentation, when you were here last week, I don't remember seeing it, and I'm not seeing one now, but it could be, there's so many folders. Oh, I see one here, okay. Draft revised projected budget FY '25. This was from
220, well,
227.
yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Because but your presentation wasn't clear to me based on the presentations and the modifications that you had, if there was a new one, or what is your newest?
So, yeah, I'm happy to drop in the newest one when it goes to back down.
Okay, all right.
But just to know that it remains very much in flux.
Yeah, I wasn't sure based on the things that you had talked about it, like where everyone had requests, where we're landing with the department's requests. So where you were with, reconciling some of those differences.
Yeah, I think the, most of the department requests have been supported. The biggest one that is very much up in discussion is the payment management program. And then some other minor changes, like, things continue to change. So, for example, in the accounting department, I was originally putting in money for succession planning as a longtime employee that handles our payroll and benefits was expected to retire, right? So we now, since that budget presentation, have that employee's retirement date, and it's no longer a succession plan, so things are changing as we move along. So, but I am happy to update drop the latest.
Okay.
And just know that anything that you see today may be different by the end of the weekend.
Sure. And also, we haven't seen the capital plan I know it was here, but we didn't go through the presentation.
Yeah, I'm
with
happy,
everything.
I'm happy to go, if you'd like to do the capital presentation.
Well, we weren't sure, like, where you are with the
Well, so-
money, are you moving money?
I'm not moving any of the money from the capital presentation. I think the question is that, and I know I've been talking to Mr. Beardmore, and he knows that I am requesting the capital planning committee to meet again because there were several items that CPC hadn't fully vetted that are on that list. And there's also the issue of the track that is an article that at this point is unfunded. So CPC, I think, did not recommend supporting that track.
So where is that article coming from? Is
So
it a
that-
submission from?
It's a submission from the superintendent and school committee, but there's not an associated funding availability for it. So
Was that, that article, that item under the, did the CPC review that article?
I think that, as I understand, that they,
No?
oh,
Not really, I don't,
or, okay.
I don't recall. Maybe,
My thought was that they did review it at some level,
Did we?
but perhaps did not make the list. I don't. Yeah, so I think that I'm happy to go through the capital plan. I have not changed any of it, but I think really I need the capital planning committee to convene a meeting so that we can have a full discussion on whether the town hall and items.
Gotcha.
so
Are-
let me just deal, so I'm our representative on the capital planning committee. So we did the capital planning process. We did our ranking. And we ranked things like the windows here and, what was it, the roof or something else high on the list.
Right.
And then Carter kind of put them off the list. He did not recommend doing them. And then there was debate about whether they were actually in the funding for if we were to go forward with, the renovation of this building. There was discussions to some level, I think, on the track, and maybe there was more. I don't recall, okay? There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
We know that at some point, we probably need to do something on the track. But we need to do things all over town, right? So it's just a matter of priorities. I guess we now have an article that has no funding source on that. So I do think we should get back together as a capital planning committee. And I think the town manager recommendations should be your recommendations, not Carter's. So, and they should be done in light of everything else we have going on. Because we didn't know the extent to which we might have problems this year. Okay, so that may have really changed the way we rank things. That may have really changed the way, maybe we shouldn't even have a capital plan this year. I mean, maybe it should just be 0 this year. I don't know. I mean,
Well, if I could just speak to some of the items on here, there was, so first, I think that it's not for a lack of will that the capital planning committee has not reconvened. I think that the chair also wanted to get through some of the school items first, and he addressed that in one of the meetings, that there was some other things that really they wanted to get through first before reconvening. So there are a couple of items here that on this list that the select board has asked me to go to the DPW director and ask him about the appropriateness of using Chapter 90 money to purchase some of the equipment for DPW, whether to get his opinion on that. So if I don't know how he's going to feel about that, but I'm certainly going to have that conversation. There is other funds on here for, I'm just going to call out one as an example, but designer services for a playground. Well, if we were to skip that step, it just is going to put out a playground for another year, and then we won't have an accurate cost estimate. So I think that design work, it's kind of relatively low dollar value on the capital plan, but if we don't fund it, it really slows down the forward momentum for those infrastructure projects, and I think that that's important. But I do think that CPC and I need to have a conversation.
yeah, just an observation is, we spend a lot of time doing an initial plan and then a detailed design on things, and then we put it on the shelf.
Oh.
And then we just go on to the next preliminary plan and detailed design. So rank and stack everything we've got going on in town right now. Where do some of these things really fall, right? I know the senior center, right, with the parking. I don't really even understand that plan, and we ranked it high, because where they want the parking is where King's Kingdom is.
Right.
And I don't see a plan as to like anyone even taking an overhead, drawing a box around something and saying, this is would be the parking lot, and this is where we're moving something.
Well, and
And TC Passios, back half of it may be coming down.
And I don't think that, I believe that that playground is almost 20 years old. I think that it would be ill-advised to move and reinstall that equipment. I think you can rebuild a playground, but using 18-year-old playground equipment that is almost at end of useful life, I don't see why, that would be a good use of funds.
And
You know-
the capital plan is in the
Yeah,
folder, too,
I-
right?
Yeah.
Everyone has it.
Exactly, yeah. Within that, like, I think there is a request for a design of a playground.
Yeah, so that's for the primary school.
Right. I think this is one of the things we should just fund the playground.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I think that.
It's like,
It's
So
not that easy.
It's
That's the
so that I can't, one of the first jobs that I had as a town administrator, literally the first day, was we had a playground project that we didn't go through a full design on. And so playgrounds are kind of where I learned a lot about the importance of this, because the community had estimated that the playground was going to be about $250,000 of upgrades needed. And then once the design firm came on, it was almost $1 million for a playground. So I think like this playground with port-in-place surfacing, that makes it accessible, that is very expensive, and you do need a lot of design and engineering work on what is the submaterial for that port-in-place surfacing.
And it's a little more complicated than that, because the primary school design playground needs to be done in conjunction with the feasibility study for the entry and driveway expansion. So
Oh,
those two have
okay,
to
so-
come, they almost, I don't know why they're two different things, honestly.
Yeah.
Other than they came in that way.
And
But-
as I understand, the entryway is a public safety issue.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
not quite Chestnut Street, but
well,
that's just because people can't read, like, do not park here, and they park there. but-
well, Chris, if you said it, I think, I don't know if it was this year in capital plan, like, sometimes I think we need to hit pause on some of our planning of some of these projects, because I think we're getting the kitchen of the Eagle House done now, that's been approved for many years.
Yes, I think that was an FY21 capital
Yeah,
item.
it's kind of crazy how, like, sometimes we fund things that don't get done forever. And having an execution plan is almost as important as funding these plans. So,
Well, certainly having Chris Ruth on staff is, I'm sure, been a godsend to the community in getting some of the projects out the door and under contract.
Right.
But I think, though, when you look at things, and I don't want to kind of call out one particular project against the other, but when you're looking at things like flooring, in replacement of flooring, I think that really, considering everything else that's going on, that calls out the question of, can the flooring wait to see where we are another year? So I mean, the plan is really what was planned before. I do think we need the CPC to convene.
I do think, like the senior center flooring, there's probably some hazard issues at this point.
But more the teen center, that it was just wear and
The
tear.
teen center, yeah, but I think the senior center does have some level of, trip hazards at this point. So, again, I agree with you. I think capital plan needs to meet. You need to make your own recommendations and put your fingerprints on this. I'm also concerned with things like, I think we're buying like 5 one-ton trucks within 2 years, which means that in like 6 years, we'll be buying 5 one-ton trucks, right? So I think the phasing of those is not,
I guess I would
Odd.
say, depending on when they're coming in, those trucks are taking about 2 years from order to arrival. So I know we,
1 ton shouldn't. The
Yeah, I
big
mean-
trucks, yes, but not a 1 ton.
that should just be.
with the 1 ton, you're right. The 6 wheels are taking 2 years.
Yeah, a small F-350 shouldn't take 2 years to get, not now.
It depends on the fit out that would have to happen at the vendor after the truck is in, but for the body. Madigan's is backed up for, if it's going to Madigan's, let's just say, Madigan's has a substantial backlog that the trucks are sitting there brand new, waiting for the fit outs.
There are other vendors available.
That's, yeah. No, but that's something else that we should look, because I think that's a valid thing of getting all these trucks. Because, I mean, I know, based on the snow removal budget that we had, and I know those are not necessarily one-ton trucks, but, you know, we ran out of trucks all of a sudden, and now, you know, we have them, but.
It would not be ideal to purchase all of the vehicles not in a manner that's not spaced out for future
Be
replacement.
phased.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's obviously things we need to do. I guess I shouldn't have said it like I did, but, any other questions, I guess, on the capital plan as it stands right now? Okay, so here's what I want to ask. The original plan had us where tonight was our public hearing, which I guess I will formally open a public hearing at some point and then close it. But we were really at the point where we were going to discuss outlining our report to town meeting. I mean, I know some motherhood and apple pie kind of stuff that needs to go into this, but I don't think we're ready to outline a report for town meeting.
I mean, we don't have any budget finalized, yeah.
Okay, so then next week, we were going to look at any kind of final actions that we might have given it to you, and then to vote on articles. We don't even have articles yet.
And so, right, so the select board spoke about the budget for the first time on Tuesday. They're meeting again next Tuesday and next Wednesday. Depending on how those meetings go with now the new discussion of a petitioned override and where that may take us, I don't see you being able to have final budgets until the earliest of the week of the 24th.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to recommend is that we don't even meet next week. I see no purpose in meeting next week. And then if you're ready for kind of your final budget on the 27th, which might even be a stretch,
Might be a stretch.
then we're really looking at the first couple weeks in April, focusing on us kind of being able to do our work of taking votes and doing a report and making recommendations. I know we talked a little bit about the actual
I'm opening up the schedule right now.
warrant mailing and when that would need to happen by.
Countdown to town meeting, okay. Okay, so the goal is to have the warrant in the mail no later than April the 16th. The original date for us to send the information to the printer was April 3rd. I find that to be very aggressive and that is not necessary for our printing house to turn around a mailing. And I think if we have the final document to the printer, I would say by the 9th. They're pretty quick. But you usually meet on Thursdays, right? So
Right.
I can I'll email the vendor and say if we got the text of this booklet to them by the 11th, so if you were to approve it, the final report on the 10th, if we got it to them the 11th, could they have it back to us to mail out on the 15th? Let me find that out.
Okay, so,
And then there's also the QR code that you had brought up, that if you want to just have some more time with the report, that we can embed a QR code in there.
okay, so if we were to focus the 27th on kind of the final budget and a review of all the articles, that would give us the 3rd and the 10th in order to take votes and finalize a report. Unless you think there's anything meaningful we can discuss next week. But I think we're going into like, you're going into like Hell Week or something. If you're not already there, I don't know, maybe it's like.
I feel as tired as I did during a Hell Week.
So I hear you. We didn't have time to, when we met last week, we had just received the school committee budget, line item budget, and I have.
That all changed last night, though.
Right, and I have previous town budget. There are, and I had spoken about a few things that I had seen in other reports. And there is one more item that when I dug through our historical data on revenues that I kind of want to speak about, and I don't want to take all night, I'm sorry. But one thing that caught my attention when you go back many years, a decade or so, is the revenue or the deficit of school tuition that we pay and receive. So us, the finance committee, would give feedback about the budgets, the percentage was, and based on your schedule, we're not going to have time to see, a school budget again and how some of this. So in 2000, I know we used to have Shirley kids come to Lunenburg. In 2011, the deficit for tuition of kids that we sent out and received was $150,000. We are right now on FY25, on the last assessment that we had from the DLS, we were 668,000. And, and the school is one that's kind of, we have a big deficit. So then I looked at our enrollment data, and I look at our current policy, and I think our current policy for accepting students in Lunenburg for FY25 was 5 kids for grade 9 and 1 for grade 10. In between classes, between 9th grade and 10th grade, in average, and probably mostly because of Monty-TAC, there is an average of 15 students that's going out of Lunenburg school districts. And I think and this is a discussion that, if I have had the budget before and an opportunity to talk about it, we need to talk about the capacity of our schools, can we lever the services that we are providing by taking in some extra kids into school choices and try to reduce that deficit of school tuition? And that's, and I'm sure, with all due respect, you know, when we are making decisions that are not relevant to money, we for sure don't want to take in extra kids. We can offer bad education for our kids. They're here. But this is something that I wanted to bring to this committee attention that, you know, maybe this is something we want to perhaps ask the school committee to take a look for in the future, to maybe level or high school ability to maybe take more kids and try to reduce some of that budget gap, because in FY25, I think the latest assessment was close to $700,000. And that's a big, big gap.
Are you looking for like kids from other communities to kind of apply
Yeah.
to come here? Or are you looking for like a busing program?
No,
from an
kids,
underserved
school choice.
community? Okay.
School choice. So it is up to the school committee to accept how many kids they're going to take it in. And for this year, it was 5 kids for grade 9 and 1 kid for grade 10. And I think, and there are, you know, we gotta have a school that technically could accept all our kids back if they want, but we have 4 years of high school that we are not seeing those kids come back. I mean, Monty Tacky alone is about 100 kids that goes there. That's 100 kids that we're paying just those, but there's extra tuition on top of that. So that's $600,000 in deficit doesn't even include the Monty Tack number. That's just children, their school choice, and also special education, which there is a report that does give you the breakout of the special education and regular school, but I only had access of that for 2 years. But it was not the majority. The majority is children that, you know, go to their charter school or they just go into a different community. And I think that, you know, when you're looking at a business, and I mean, this experience that I'm bringing, we are talking about leveling off the service that we have. We could theoretically have these kids here. So is this something that we want to maybe consider in taking more kids so that we are not at a gap of 2.5 million plus between Monty Tack and the kids that school choice out? The high school classrooms, and the superintendent had a year, like all the FYs in their grade. I traced every school, every classroom, and I have the data. So, and I know most of it's Monty Tack. So, for example, a class that was 129 kids in 8th grade, it became 120. There was a class that was 126 kids, became 107 when they went to the high school. So we do have that space. And that's, you know, I'm just looking at how can we help, but, you know, reduce that deficit of the school budget.
What's the criteria of accepting students?
It's just an open.
Like lottery? Is it?
No, it's whatever policy they have, but they do have a number.
So let me just ask a question. I don't think we're going to get anywhere on this to solving this year's budget issues, right?
But the school committee is going to make a decision about how many kids, which grades they allow in, probably
When?
in the next.
For next year?
For next year, yeah. That will happen before school committee, town meeting.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Archibald.
That's all right. Carol Ashambo, 662 Page Street. The school committee has to make a decision on the number of students to accept for school choice. It's either the 1st or the 15th of June. And typically, this past year, we did not fill those 5 seats in the 9th grade. And by having budgets that cut here, there, and everywhere, I don't anticipate we will get those kids. We've cut a teacher at the high school in every discipline. So our capacity to take in more kids is less than it was because we have that many less teachers to do so. We did talk about opening up younger grades, because we do get a lot of people asking in the younger grades, But then we cut a teacher from each of those grade levels as well, though we have brought many of them back. That will be part of the discussion when we do it. But we don't want to have more kids and have, particularly our younger kids, in classrooms of 30 kids. So we had to wait for all of this to settle.
Right. And I hear every year there will be a concern about, do we have enough kids? And it's just historically speaking, looking at, the money that the schools used to take in.
Oh, yeah.
And the schools that we're not taking in, and the student body, we can see that this is a deficit that has grown.
We get it. We get it.
Right, and now that we're pressured for money, we get to look at it a little harder and, and see what we can accommodate, because it's, when we had to take kids, we used to take it, right? When we had the contract with Shirley.
Well, with the kids from Shirley, they either had to go to Air or come here because they had no high school.
Right.
But then once they regionalized,
Right.
That went away.
Right. I think, one thing when you say, we have the 5 spots open, and they're still open, if we don't consistently show availability, parents that might be looking.
We do at the high school level. We always have spots open in the 9th and 10th grade. Typically, 11th and 12th graders don't change their high school.
Right.
So we always have spots open at the 9th and 10th grade.
8th grade, did we?
8th grade, we haven't done before, but that was part of the discussion, but then we had this uncertainty as to what the class size would be. So that is a discussion that will come up before we make the decision
Okay,
this spring.
yeah, but I do want you there. It's getting late, and
I know.
I do have one question for you. When does your budget, when did you vote on your budget?
Last night,
You did? What was the recommendation?
the recommendation as to what to cut,
What did you vote?
the exact number?
Did you vote the town?
We
manager?
vote I'm sorry, we vote the town manager's number.
Okay.
We made it balance.
Okay, so I guess schools would be ready to come back potentially next week. Is that true?
We could tell you what we did on the town manager's budget.
But things might change between now and then.
Not on the town manager's budget, I do not believe.
On the amount, it won't change, but.
The
what
amount
is-
won't, no, we voted it. What
Right.
is taken out or put back in should not change between now and next week. I
Okay, so
can't imagine.
so maybe we should put schools on next week? What's the thought?
Do they have a final budget? How?
Yes, we voted it last
You have a
night.
final decision on how the money will be allocated, or you have
Yes.
the number?
We have the final decision on how the money will be allocated.
Okay, so,
I haven't seen the meeting because it was not available
Yeah,
yet.
no, we had a Zoom disaster.
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah.
why don't I change that decision? Why don't we have schools come in next week then? Because I think if you voted on it last night, next week you should be able to give us a presentation.
I will pass that along.
Okay. All right, so we'll do schools next week,
At the 20th?
the 20th, yeah. I know you won't be here, but you can watch it, and if you have any pre-questions or anything. Everyone else is available?
Should be.
Okay. Okay, and then the 27th, we'll get more towards final budgets and hopefully final capital plan. And then we'll have to go the 3rd and 10th on votes and reports, so. If you guys have ideas on reports, email me and just me. If you have any kind of thoughts that you want to incorporate into things. We can't deliberate on it outside, but I can collect people's thoughts on it. Just because it's always hard to get that done in 2 meetings. Because we can't deliberate outside of a meeting, so.
Can we assess on the 3rd about adding a meeting, like 2 meetings the following week to get it done by the 10th? I know we've met twice once.
We could do that. We would, we'd have to find space. We could find space. But yeah, I mean, if we needed to, we could add a small meeting.
I want to present airtight things with no holes.
Okay. Let's talk about that possibility on the 27th. We'll assess where we are.
Okay.
Okay, so I will recommend that I change the agenda for next week to have schools. I'll see if there's any other topics that we want, but schools next week, okay? All right, so just for formality, because it's on the agenda and it was posted in the ledger, can I have a motion to open public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, I'm going to open public hearing. Is there anything people generally want to speak about in a public hearing? Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add on to a comment you made a short time ago, to the town manager through you, I implore you to take ownership, as the chair suggested, of this budget. You've got lots of input from most all the stakeholders. The budget sits with you in the charter, so it is your budget, not 11,000 people's different budgets. So I implore you to, spend the time you have left in the next few weeks to sit with your financial team, Izzy and everybody else you're working with within Town Hall, to bring your budget forward, not everybody else's budget, or it'll be a fiasco on town meeting floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Go ahead, John.
Hi, Chris. How are you? Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you get a little closer maybe to your mic?
Yeah, hold on a second. Hold on. Let me fix that.
And reminder, name and address.
All right. Yep. It's John Bowen, 162 Highland Street. Is that a little bit better?
Yep.
Okay. So I think that Dave Passios kind of said it right. You have the information, put your budget together, and make your recommendations on what you think is best for the town. Not necessarily what's best for every department and what somebody wants. There are a number of different items that you raised this evening, particularly the capital planning committee issue. The town manager is concerned about that as well. I'm also concerned about that because there are items on there that you probably shouldn't have on there, particularly with boards that have money and agencies that have the ability to raise money. The Parks Commission has an opportunity to be able to raise money. You have, just like you have a beach badge, you get a park badge. There's all sorts of things that can be done, that nobody's really looking at. I know that's not a popular opinion, but when you have an economy like we have, this is what you're stuck with. The schools got to give fees. They have to put fees out. People have to pay fees for transportation. People have to pay fees to be able to play in sports. People have to fork over money for their own uniforms, things like that. You're going to have to revert back to some old school ways, like when all of us went to school and our mums and dads paid for every little thing that we did, from Pop Warner to, T-ball. And, these are just some of my concerns. You have the Cemetery Commission has $96,000. You have a $50,000 capital plan item. You can cut that. $96,000, they just want to sit there and expand a little bit of space in the North Cemetery. That we have 80 graves. We only get rid of by sale maybe 3 a year, if that. There's 80 graves between the North and South Cemetery. So that's a project that's, something that can wait in the wings. I sent you guys a PowerPoint to your emails a couple of weeks ago, as I did with the town manager, and I'll be presenting that on the 18th to the select board, both of them, the PowerPoint on the proposition of a cemetery corporation, as well as a warrant article with regard to the handling of funds and so on and so forth with the cemetery department. I just wanted to let you know that, these are things that we have to cut, and Dave Patsios is right. Chris, you and your board sit down with all the information you have, write up your own budget and say, these are our recommendations, and we're voting down everything else. Hold your votes on your budget, and if anybody's not in there, they get a no vote. That's my recommendation and suggestion. I think Dave hit the nail on the head. You guys make the budget as an advisory committee to the citizens for what's the best, not for what every department wants or what every department needs, but what's best, for the financial needs of the taxpayers in this town. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thank you, John. Were there any other members that want to?
Glenn McLeod, 436 Reservoir Road. I wasn't sure the difference between the public now and a public comment later. No difference?
I don't know.
Okay. So I'll keep it short. I just wanted to touch base a little bit about the building design. That is something that there's really nothing about that project that I do like. I think the most compelling argument was relative to the ADA requirements. I mean, I myself come in through that front door a little bit differently than I would a normal door. But I do think that's one of the underlying issues, in that should have been addressed many, many years ago. And even looking at the proposed design about raising the sidewalk and just changing the doors, I mean, some of those seem pretty straightforward. So it's tough to use that. Again, as compelling as that argument was, it does need to be addressed. I'll just keep it short. I mean, I can go on different issues if you like, but overall, and I truly do appreciate, all the work that committee has put in, and how frustrating it is for someone, like myself, to come up and not support the project. Particularly, as full disclosure, I am from away. I'm that guy. We moved to Lunenburg in July of 2023, specifically because we loved Lunenburg. It was a really nice small town, and it's frustrating. And I understand that's how life goes, but it's frustrating now to see that all these big issues. Does Lunenburg want to be a different town, a big town, and they have every right to make those decisions. And it's really quite amazing that all of these things are coming down at once. And I will also say that I am not speaking certainly for any of the employees here in town, having, really not knowing any of them, but to your comment about, accommodating the employees, it's a very appropriate comment to make. And speaking as a 29-year municipal employee, it is very difficult to have a local government as your boss. It's frustrating, particularly where I lived in and worked for the same town. But I can assure you, from my standpoint, as a municipal employee, the primary things to be concerned about is making the employees feel appreciated, that they receive a fair pay. We realize we'll never be happy with it. We always want a little bit more. But we just want to, at the end of the day, feel as though we've been treated fairly and respectfully. And before I forget to mention, I jump around a bit, I really do feel comforted by, your board going over all these things, but specifically appreciative to having the town manager on board during these difficult times. I think we're very fortunate to have her guidance in this quagmire, if you will. But back to the employees, with all of these discussions, and without getting into the rabbit hole that you are all too familiar with, I, as an employee, would much prefer to have my fellow employees with me than to have them be laid off and I'm sitting in a nice office, or vice versa. I'm sitting at home laid off. These are very difficult decisions, and they're quite frankly, having watched the school committee meeting, it is, it's impossible. But I'll stop there, otherwise I'll keep going.
Yeah, no, and I guess what's the difference between public hearing and public comment? I think public hearing is a little, I think, more interactive. So
Yeah.
it is your ability to ask a question and get.
Oh, okay.
Public
I thought I
comment.
was going to get in trouble. Whew.
No, public comment, you can literally go up there for 3 minutes and
Right.
curse. On
Yeah,
any topic.
I promise not to do that.
So please don't, but.
Yeah.
But your First Amendment rights allow you to do it.
Right, and from all the years of watching Plug to Pack, that I'm well-versed on what is going on in town. And at home, I would appreciate when someone comes up and does that. I find it entertaining, but I won't do that. I don't plan. And I didn't want to bring it up earlier as a question as it relates to the Municipal Building Design Committee. But one of the, and I'll really try not to go down the rabbit hole, but one of the things I found particularly troubling was I was fully invested through the process. And I was comforted, although skeptical, of the $15 million hardline budget cap that they had. And although I understand the explanation that went through how we got up to the 23 million, I really was, looking forward to that $15 million cap, and that just kind of went away. And I understand that, but to PAC, I really appreciate their content coverage and have benefited from it. And I also would, make the comment that I think the town has to, in their long-term plans, realize that they will need to be supported within the town budget, and that I would certainly support that.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. And just for your awareness, because maybe you're more new to the town, you said, I think we've been talking about town hall for over a decade, right? I mean,
it's been a
Jay,
while.
you're like our historian, I think. So there's been a lot
Yeah.
of iterations.
Yeah,
and
more than that.
Yeah, and that's why I state that, like, a full disclosure, I'm that guy, because I hear that in the meetings that, people come in, and it's a funny quote that I'll remember from my years, again, as a municipal employee. One of the coworkers had said to us, as we maybe made some comments about our bosses, the local government, and the wise old man turns and said, the people who will be running this town in 5 years do not even live here yet. And it plays out. It plays out. And, to the point about people from away coming in, I came from down south, Westboro. Right, Mass
I grew up
Pike
in
and Fort Knave.
Southborough.
Oh, yeah. So, so you'd understand. I mean, Southborough is still a small community, but Westboro is what, Lunenburg is what Westboro was 50 years ago. And it's part of what impresses me about the community. But again, about the derailing, long-standing programs, one of my fundamental concerns too with this process or this proposal is, and I may have this wrong, but it came out of ARPA funds. And what I mean by that, it wasn't the voters of town that voted at town meeting with Lunenburg tax dollars to to hire this architect to create this plan. So whether, I forget the amount it was like $200,000, thereabouts, was ARPA money. So I think that little, that step or stage, I suppose, of the process was a little concerning to me. Like, I would feel a little more confident if the voters had actually implemented, authorized, funded that specific plan. That's not a huge issue, but it's just one of the problems I kind of have with it. But globally, I just think it's a terrible plan. And I actually feel horrible about that, and I am probably being a little more straightforward with it because I don't actually know anybody. I don't know the people on the board. I don't know you guys, so it's, but my comments are from the heart. And there's so much talk about affordable housing and the housing crisis. The conversation really should be about affordable living. And it is becoming so unaffordable to live in Massachusetts that, you know, we hear so much about grants and conservation, and, you know, even now with I'm going down a rabbit hole, aren't I? But it's like there's so much demands on our individual budgets, and I've heard several comments. I think everybody agrees that the state is not stepping in, and the state is the heart of what the problem is, and it's causing us, the community members, to not necessarily turn on one another, but there are some comments from during the school committee of some disappointment with the taxpayers for not supporting the schools. And that's heartbreaking to hear, because I think that is what is happening at the state level, and our representatives, our contingent, whatever they call them, as they're just not. I don't believe personally that they are representing their constituents. And again, watching the school committee, Mr. Beardmore has gone on a couple of, again, a gentleman I don't even know, I feel weird saying his name, but he went on some tangents that he was just spot on.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm a systems engineer. We have a systemic problem in this state right now.
Right.
It is gonna break.
Right. And I encourage everyone, especially, I was disheartened to hear that although I fully support the democratic process, I think it's fantastic that citizens can bring articles. I love it. It forces the conversation. But I was really impressed with the meeting at the Selectmen and School Committee the other night, where I think they really came up with an excellent plan to bring all this important information to the voters, educate them so that they can understand and fully grasp what it is you and the town manager and every other department head and employee is trying to confront, and have a really in-depth discussion. And now with the revelation that there's a partial override, if you will, is just it concerns me that derails that. Really, I thought that was going to be a great step forward. And these, back to the affordability, it's just a lot of these conversations are siloed. I hear that term a lot. They really can't be. And again, dabbling with that proverbial rabbit hole, one of the conversations I would implore you to have and the town to have is relative to this stormwater utility. I mean, to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, that sounds like you're taking money out of the general budget, that which is controlled by Proposition 2.5, putting it into something that sounds nice, a stormwater utility. So that's whether they decide it's $40 a year or $50 or $100 a year per resident, that's essentially an override. I mean, if sometimes an override could, like the last one, I think was roughly $150 per average taxpayer. But to me, it technically may be wrong, but if it's money that would otherwise have been even in part in the general budget or appropriated in a town, a separate article, it's just another monthly bill.
Yeah, right now, one of the things we are doing is Chapter 90 is funding a lot of those projects.
Yep.
But if we are looking at Chapter 90 as a means by which to take on more of the pavement management plan, then that could be a problem. And I know town manager and Bill Bernard, DPW director, have sent us at least some analyses on his initial cut on that. But infrastructure is something this board and capital planning have looked at as a future problem for the town outside of all the other issues that we potentially have.
Yeah, and I do love Lunenburg roads, and I think it was may have been Anna's comment that you know when you leave Lunenburg because you hit a pothole.
Oh yeah.
And it's almost it's actually like a true statement. So, and again, the poor town manager, like whenever she, even the new guy gasped when she said she wanted to take the $550,000. Like, I was like aghast.
Could be
But
our
I get it.
bond.
It's a great conversation to have.
That could be our
I don't love it, but,
best road.
all right, I'll walk away so you guys can go home. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Chris, thank you.
You muted yourself somehow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Dave Passios, former resident of Lunenburg, former member of this committee, presently located in Jefferson, New Hampshire, Presidential Highway. So that will take care of the people that were complaining about me not presenting myself at the beginning of my comments. Anyway, stop wasting time here. First of all, question for the chair. Is there another public hearing date scheduled? Because there's a whole bunch, as you stated before in this meeting, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you guys haven't even received yet and cannot be reviewed in an open public meeting until you receive it. One of my big concerns is hearing from whoever sponsored the override article to fully explain the expected breakdown of that $2 million override. That's an essential piece before it goes into town meeting and the ballot, I believe.
Mr.
I
Chair,
had a
if I
second
may,
point.
I don't think as a citizen petition, we can demand that citizen to explain things to us.
No, you can invite them though,
can ask.
and I
Yeah,
bet
we
they'll
can
come in.
ask, but I was just, we can't demand.
No.
Yeah, so I would say that irrespective of the 2.5 question, we certainly will plan on another public hearing. I would envision it probably to be April 3rd. Because April 10th, we will be finalizing everything, so, and
Right.
I don't think we'll be ready for the 27th, but
Yeah.
it would
And,
either be the 27th or April 3rd, I guess, is what
Yeah.
I'll say.
Just one other quick comment, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
And my other concern for there needing to be another one is that, as the town manager mentioned this evening, the articles that were put in by the superintendent and the school department are presently sitting there as unfunded articles. Those need, maybe that will change before your next public hearing, but I see that as seriously problematic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the question is, do we leave town meeting with a balanced budget?
Right,
We shall see, right?
yeah.
No, all good points, Dave, as, I agree with everything you said, so.
Yeah, just one quick one, and then I'm done for the night. Just want you to be aware, if you haven't had a chance to watch the back end of the select board meeting the other night, after they sat there in workshop with the school committee, negotiating back and forth as to how they could fill gaps and use free cash and all this other stuff, which I still believe is very dangerous, but maybe you can get away with it. Lo and behold, later in the meeting, in their meeting, that it was really the first time, I believe, that town manager and the select board went through the budget similar to the way you guys went through it this evening. And they went through that entire workshop, and halfway through their meeting, not realizing that the cut to the pavement management line was to balance the town side budget. It was a revelation that came up. If you watch the video, the revelation that came up in the middle of that part of the meeting. And, so they're, and my take after that was they were all in panic. They want to push back the date of town meeting. They want to push back the date of the ballot, all kinds of, knee-jerk reactions. And in the past, the Finance Committee is the one that has kind of cooled the jets on some of these committees by keeping abreast of what's going on. And just be as much aware as the Finance Committee as to what's going on in these other committees, because it's just going forward too fast. Thank you. And I'm done. I will not come back on tonight.
All right, thanks, Dave. I think a lot of people, especially late at night, have knee-jerk reactions to things. It's natural to talk, to think, and come up with things, so, but somehow we have to get through and to town meeting, and we will all work to get there. So, all right, anyone else want to be heard? Okay, I would entertain a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're out of public hearing. All right, we were going to do new business of outlining the Finance Committee annual report. I have ideas floating around my head as to what we need to do on it. I do think there's got to be some level of talking through Prop 2.5s and levies and levy limits and excluded debt, our policies and stuff like that, probably, as we talked a little bit about today. And then, as we start to take votes on things, reflect what our recommendations are collectively, or even if we're not, even if we have differences, which, is good. That's democracy. But again, I think if anyone has any ideas that they want highlighted on it, just send me a note and I'll start to think about it. Or, if you want to say it now, but, okay. I think we talked through anything related to old business. We have minutes that were dropped in from 2:20. Did everyone look at those?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to check the minute folder? Sorry, I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they were in the email.
Yeah.
She may have done both. I've lost
email.
track.
I didn't
She usually emails them and drops them in there.
Yeah, Sunday the 9th, she emailed.
When was the email?
Sunday the 9th, she emailed them.
Okay.
I'd like to stay up with minutes, but did you get a chance to look at it, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'd entertain a motion on the minutes.
Motion to move the minutes of February 20th.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I didn't hear Anna. Did you
I
vote?
said aye.
Okay, all right.
Enough ayes. Good with it.
All right, 220 approved. All right, any committee reports? If everyone, if anyone hasn't seen that joint meeting of the school and select board, which was under the select board's meeting, it was in the beginning, I might recommend watching it. If you watch it on YouTube, you can put it on 1.5 speed, which does make your laugh sound really funny. And you can get through it at a little bit faster and not lose anything. So I don't think there's any other committee, or does anyone else have any other committee reports? Okay. Any actions or topics for future meetings? I think we kind of talked through that. If anyone thinks I missed anything, again, just let me know and I'll get it on the agenda. We'll do school committee, I'll verify it, but that will be the plan of record next week.
And if we could have those with a little bit of advance, it's kind of hard to absorb a budget and then
Yeah.
a meeting a minute later.
Yeah, I know. Yep. Okay. Any final public comment from the public? All right.
Karen Menard, 672 Page Street. I'm here, so I'm going to make my public comment in person instead of from home in my bed in my pajamas. As I listen to you guys talk tonight, it's bringing me back to a year ago when we were discussing grants. So I want to throw a couple of numbers out there because I think that numbers to understand what's available for grants is important for people to understand. This is one grant alone. This is from the Mass Office on Disability, which is the ADA grant, a grant that could be applied for planning and projects. The school playground, the Marshall Park playground. In FY '24, $3,932,321 is the amount of grant money that went out to communities. In FY '25, it was $4,910,668. That's a total of 59 grants, 25 were for planning and 34 for projects. If we don't push our town administration, whether it be the schools, facilities, parks, anybody, to be applying for these, they don't. There's money out there. What's the worst that can happen? They're going to tell us no? Okay, so be it. I applied for the ADA grant by myself. Anna probably proofread it before I sent it off, but I applied for it by myself. We didn't get it, but I don't think our project was strong enough to get it, and that was okay. But we applied for it. We're never going to get something that we don't apply for. So when capital planning sees these projects come through, one of the first things that should be asked are, have you investigated the grants available? And did you apply for them? And at some point, somebody's going to have to say, if you didn't apply for them, don't come to us looking for money. We're not going to give it to you. We're not going to rate your project high enough. If there's money available, we should be going for it. On the for the land and water grant and the the park grant, I believe it was something like just over $27 million that were awarded in grant money for parks and conservation land last year alone. How many? We went for it, obviously, but this is the first time I know of that parks had ever gone for a grant like that. So, you know, I think we need to put some emphasis. That is state money. It's our taxpayer money in the end of the day, but it's state money. So although we don't get enough from, you know, the Chapter 70 stuff, you know, we can fight for that, but at the same time, we're not even fighting for money that's available, and we need to be fighting for that. So I would urge you guys to, you know, say to these people that are coming before you. The last thing that I wanted to throw out there was, and if you had asked me this, if I supported the building reuse project a few years ago, it would have been an absolute, I would have been a no, just because I couldn't see the TC Passios building doing what I thought it needed to do. But the last year or two, especially with Chris being involved in the Finance Committee, has been very eye-opening in terms of meeting space. We don't have it. You know, a great example of this is, and there's a problem that we have with the way we have to secure meeting space, and I know that's something that town manager's been made aware of. I've complained about it to her assistant many times. Chris has complained about it. But at the end of the day, that's a process that can be fixed, but we can't fix the meeting space that we have available. We are having meetings. The Parks Commission is a great example. We're a 5-member board meeting in the upstairs meeting room at Ritter. There's 5 of us, and there were probably 10 to 12 members of the public there. That room is no bigger than this stage, and there's stuff in that room. We need more meeting space. I don't know how to get it. And the other thing is that Michael Ray is not kidding when he says to you that we have ADA accessible buildings on paper. To get into that building, if there is a meeting only in the downstairs meeting room at Ritter, the only way to access that, if you are in a wheelchair or if you can't do stairs, is to knock on the door and hope that somebody downstairs is going to hear it, which means our meeting was not accessible to the public. We can't do that any longer. We have to have accessible buildings where everybody, every member of our community, I don't want to hear that, oh, my 85-year-old father was able to get in. Well, that's fine. I know a 35-year-old woman that couldn't get into this room one day because where our elevator comes up was blocked. We can't do that anymore. We know better. It's 2025. We have to do better. And by doing better, it is going to mean expending some money on things that maybe we don't want to expend it on. But we have to make our buildings accessible to everybody, and we need to have better meeting space so that people like us aren't spending a tremendous amount of time jumping through hoops trying to figure out where we can even have a meeting. So that's all. That's my say for tonight.
Thank you.
I'm driving myself home. I drove my own car. I don't know. But I will put a plug. Ruby's Donuts on the table. I'm rocking for everybody.
Rhonda?
I'm gonna make a comment about the,
They're really good. They're really good. I've eaten like 4.
we were watching you.
Thanks, Jen.
I just make a comment about the original intent of the grant writing services position was to look for grants that regular full-time, like department heads apply for the regular grants that they know are out there. It's usually like other boards and commissions that have a hard time finding grants. And that was part of the reasoning behind getting grant writing services, was someone that, when we have something that comes up, like Marshall Park, and we say to them to find a consulting company, grant writing company, that would go look for those grants that money that you talk about. And hopefully, their expertise would make it easier for us to get grants.
The crazy part on that, Jay, is that when that grant writer, subcontractor, whatever you want to call it, was put in,
Services,
Parks had already started to apply for our grants.
yes.
So we knew about it.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe any other group has reached out to use those.
Not $1 has been spent.
Not $1 has been spent. Parks is, our chair has initiated it, but no other group has reached out to try to use any of these funds. So, and I think it's really a matter of, until somebody, on some of these boards that are making some financial decisions, starts holding people's feet to the fire to say, if you want town money, we also need you to be, applying for all of the other funds that can be available. I will guarantee you that I will be standing in front of town meeting requesting money for Marshall Park's project. But I'm also going to be saying to you, we are going to apply for every single grant that we can possibly do. The number of hours that I personally spent, that Anna personally spent on these grants, I think there was our first one, and now mind you, it was the first grant that I ever applied for. I think in the 2 weeks before it was due, I was well over 40 hours of volunteer time putting this in.
Yeah.
It's legwork that I think is worth it. And if there was another group that said, I'm interested in applying for a grant, do you have any information for me? I would absolutely share it, and I'd also be sending them, to town manager to say, there's grant writing services available. But nobody holds them to it. I feel like I sent over to the school the ADA grant, and it's possible that I didn't. But, that to me is so simple, so self-explanatory, and for somebody that's written grants before, that's probably the easiest one we could do. So, I don't know how to get people to actually expend it. So I know that the money is there, and I know what the intent of it was. It just, it didn't, we're a year in, and it didn't get the ball moving. And, it would be nice for some of our projects to be funded partially by, some outside funds versus all inside, so.
Yeah, I do think we need some kind of policy procedure or something on how to use some of those funds for it, because hopefully it does pay for itself, and maybe it becomes more in the future if we're able to get a return on investment on it. Okay, John,
Hi, John Bowen, 162 Highland Street. Real
you got to
quick.
speak up again, John.
Yeah.
Yep, that's okay. John Bowen, 162 Highland Street. I actually agree with Karen on that. I know on Tuesday, the town manager can attest to this, that there was a discussion with regard to the grant writer position and people who can write grants, and that, Michael Jeffries made a point that, a grant really isn't free money, so much so as you have to maintain what you get when you get that kind of money for a particular project. So if you don't have any kind of maintenance or any kind of follow-up plan or anything like that, you go for a grant, you get the grant, you build it, and then who do you hand it to? Oh, here you go, Phil Bernard, take care of it. Oh, here you go, Chris Ruth, take care of that. Here you go, town manager. Yeah, that's only an increase of $30,000 a year just to be able to manage that new grant of that free money we got. And we really have to be very, very careful about what we ask for, because if we ask for something we can't maintain it, it's just going to end up like the Passios building. And I'm just saying is that's just an overall thing. And again, if a division like the Parks Department, Conservation, Cemetery, they have money in their coffers, use that, go find grants, go find money, okay? And like I said, raise fees, okay? Raise fees to enter the park, fees to use the park, fees to use the beach. They do that, you know what I mean? And, things like that. Dogs get licenses. Okay, we got dog licenses. That gets paid. That goes to animal control and a portion goes somewhere else. I can't remember where. But just my thoughts. But I kind of agree with Karen. You don't go looking elsewhere before you start asking the town for money, you don't get the money. And I agree with Karen. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Any final public comment from the public? Any public comment from the board?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you all.
Grandfather had an old farmhouse. Like this in old press tin.
Yeah.
Unpainted.